At the port of Lingu City, the fleet of the great Prince Torola, Knight, has just docked. The second prince turned and said, "Brother, we have arrived at the port Lufeng promised us to fix." The first prince happily replied, "We have finally arrived. Wait until we finish editing, then we will teach that bastard a proper lesson." The second prince happily agreed, "Yes." Before registration, the sound was heard on the wall, "All members, prepare for level 1 battle." The cannon was pointed at Torola's ship, making the first prince and second prince stunned. You swindler, this is a trap. Hateful, such a shameless person." The majestic Nyoda walked in, all the soldiers lined up in 2 rows and bowed. The Nyo city lord arrived. As soon as he saw the city lord, the first prince shouted loudly, "City lord Nyo, what do you mean? I have already signed a contract with your majesty the king." Nyoda Wanzuan replied, "Don't be agitated, Prince Knight. I'm just following the rules." The first prince panicked, "The rules?" Ngudai smiled and replied, "Yes, to ensure the safety of the country, we do not allow people to bring weapons into the country." The second prince also got angry and spoke up, "Not allowing us to carry weapons, so how can we be safe? Nyodai guarantees that if you don't actively do bad things, no one will affect your safety. In addition, according to the regulations, the army cannot enter the city, they can only camp outside. Of course, your highnesses can enter Lingu City." These words completely angered the 2 princes. "What, then there are so many of us, where can we stay?" Nyoda replied, "Don't worry, we have prepared tents for everyone, we will move them to everyone now." The dark-faced Grand Prince replied, "What if we don't cooperate?" Ngudai's voice became serious and replied, "Then please, everyone, go back to where you came from." The Crown Prince gritted his teeth, "You guys are forcing me." But then, he still had to give up, got off the boat and left his weapon. The first prince left, thinking in his head, "I have remembered today's debt." Then say, "Come, we enter the city." In Lingu City, the second prince was looking around and said, "This side of Han Dynasty, even if it wasn't the royal capital, was still this prosperous. The ground was also very clean." The Crown Prince felt no interest in speaking, it was just cleanliness, what use was it? But then his nostrils widened and he sniffed, it smelled so good. The second prince excitedly pointed to a crowd of people lining up and said, "Look over there are so many people." Reading the name written on the signboard, the Crown Prince said, "The Lingu branch of Drunken Tower, what a strange name." The 2 men walked into the restaurant aggressively, talking as they walked. They had to go and eat first. They were about to starve to death on the boat. In front of a table full of delicious food, the prince excitedly said, "Look, so many delicious foods." The first prince gnawed on a chicken leg and said, "Han Dynasty also put a lot of thought into these things." After eating just 1 piece, the prince was surprised, "This taste, why is it so delicious?" The people at the next table saw the 2 of them eating ravenously and said, "Ha, this scene again. Can't outsiders have anything new, really?" After they finished eating and drinking, the waiter brought the bill and said, "Hello, the total is 200 yuan. The 2 of them were full and asked, "What is yuan?" The waiter replied, "Of course it is a check issued by the bank. Surely the guests must have some." The words angered the first prince, he gritted his teeth and said, "Huh, what do you mean?" The first prince was about to stand up and hit the employee, but the second prince stopped him. "Wait, you can't cause trouble now. Let me." Then he enthusiastically walked up to the staff and said, "Brother, we just arrived from outside and don't know the situation here. Can you please exchange this before paying? Also, where is the money house? Please tell us." The staff happily replied, "Oh, okay." After finishing, the second prince ran after the first prince and said, "Brother, it's clear." The first prince said as he walked, let's go to Han Dynasty." It was night, winter, and snow had begun to fall. The 2 princes and their men were sitting around a fire warming themselves. The 2 princes had just returned from the city and were talking as they walked. "Little brother, don't say that, Han Dynasty's food is really great," the second prince also added. "That's right, I still remember the taste of lunch, are you still going tomorrow?" The Crown Prince heard this and immediately sarcastically said, "Look at your future, but you can still go." Seeing that the 2 princes had returned, Duke Leinard came out to welcome them, "Your Highnesses." Seeing this, the 2 princes asked, "Duke, you've had a hard time managing your camp." The Duke replied, "It's just a small matter. Your Highnesses, it is like this, our merchant fleet cannot go ashore yet. Do you think you can help to make connections, so that the people of Han Dynasty agree to let our merchant fleet go ashore?" The Crown Prince heard this and immediately snorted coldly. "If you want to go ashore, think of a way yourself, don't bother me." Being refused, the Duke immediately called out, "Your Highness, Your Highness." The Crown Prince still left coldly, the Duke let out a disappointed sigh. At night at Lingu port, the merchant fleet had not yet docked. Duke Leinard came to find the merchants. A merchant opened the door and said, "Guild Master, how is it?" The Duke replied sadly, "His Highness is not willing to help." Then the merchants and the duke sat down and discussed, why don't we negotiate directly with the Han Dynasty? Another person said, I'm afraid it will be difficult. I heard that when His Highness first came ashore, he had to hand over 20,000 gold coins along with the Larsen water before he could dock. The other person also said that relying on us alone, we might not be able to fill the Han Dynasty's stomachs. The duke was still sadly leaning on his hands, thinking, and saying nothing. Then he spoke up, what should we do? Should everyone on the boat starve to death? A girl came to comfort him, my lord duke, you are the duke of the empire, and also the president of our National Commerce Association, do you think there is any other way? The duke replied, let me think. Suddenly there was a loud voice, the guild leader, a person from the Larsen Empire Chamber of Commerce, arrived. Behind her was a beautiful pink-haired girl. Duke Leinard was surprised, Miss Rose. The young lady replied in a gentle voice, long time no see, my lord the duke, I have come to cooperate with my lord the duke. This morning, I received intelligence from Fenton, the merchant of Fabro, that Yadian City is planning to open its port to merchants. However, we need to report the quantity of goods we want to buy. Of course, we don't need to worry about the goods, he has already told us the items worth buying. However, relying solely on the Larsen Chamber of Commerce is likely not up to their standards. You also know the price of our two armies getting ashore. The Duke was delighted when he heard this and replied, so the young lady wants us to pay together and then go ashore together. That's great, I actually had that idea too. Miss Rose happily agreed, okay, tomorrow we will go to Yadian City together. Blue sky, white clouds, slightly harsh sunlight, Changan City space really makes people relax. Young master is back, I have been waiting for you. His Highness Lu Feng has just returned to the gate of Changan City with Mina. Ellie happily spread her arms wide and ran towards Lu Feng. She must have missed Lu Feng very much. And Nicole La, who was standing to the side, was also smiling, her heart fluttering as she waited for Lu Feng and Mina to return. The atmosphere was extremely joyful and cheerful. Ellie hugged Lu Feng, tears welling up in her eyes. Princess Ellie said to Lu Feng with a tearful face. During the time you weren't here, I worked hard to take care of everything, worked hard to arrange so many things in the most satisfactory way. I'm so tired I'm sick. As she spoke, Ellie clung to Lu Feng's neck and cried. Lu Feng saw this and hugged Ellie, his voice filled with affection and gentle comfort. Oh, you've worked hard, Ellie. Stop crying, I know how talented you are, I'll see how things are in a bit. By the way, Ellie said she was too tired from work and got sick, right? Let me try to lift it. Hey, why does it still feel so heavy? Lu Feng lifted Ellie up to tease her. Ellie replied whiningly. No way, hoo-hoo, she's clearly thinner. Hee, Lu Feng replied happily. Come on, I'm just teasing you. Ellie is really sick, she's lost a lot of weight. Young master is so naughty. I can't stand it. Mina also spoke up when she saw this scene. Come on young master, Ellie is about to cry. Young master, stop teasing Ellie. Jenny, who was standing timidly to the side, also witnessed this scene. Her face was like, everyone here is so comfortable, it's really fun. When everyone stopped him, Lu Feng stopped teasing Ellie. Princess Ellie also stopped whining. Only then did Ellie look towards Jenny who was standing in a corner. Ellie asked seriously, who is this girl? Ellie's way of asking and her manner made Jenny a little startled. Jenny replied with hesitation. Hello, my name is Jenny. I come from the Larsen Empire. His Highness Lu Feng also interjected. Ellie, Jenny, she helped us a lot when we were in Yadian City. Ellie didn't even bother to pay attention to what Lu Feng said. She stared at Jenny's plump breasts, filled with jealousy. Ellie's eyes were fixed on Jenny. That gaze caused question marks to appear around Jenny's head. Jenny stood there, frozen, not understanding where the strange creature in front of her came from. Ellie kept looking at Jenny's bust until her eyes popped out. She was angry, self-consciously turned away, then threw back a sentence. Don't worry Jenny, you are helping His Majesty, you are our guest. You don't need to be so nervous. Oh my god, Ellie's tone was like that, who wouldn't be nervous? But Jenny just gently replied. Yes, thank you. Turning away, Ellie's heart ached. She clenched her fists and thought angrily. Damn it, I lost to another person. Oh my god, Ellie, what's wrong with you? Just looking at you makes me feel ashamed. While Ellie was still feeling sorry for herself, Lu Feng put his arm around Jenny's shoulder and instructed Nicole. Nicole, please quickly arrange a room for Jenny to rest. Jenny looks tired. Yes, young master, Nicole replied politely. In the Changan City government conference room, Lu Feng was sitting seriously with Ellie to talk about Yadian City. He said, now that the battle in Yadian City has ended. Next, our focus will shift to selling our products abroad. Only then can the economy flourish. Ellie, quickly arrange for someone to prepare the items on this list. In addition, select the crew. We must directly send trading ships to the Toa Empire and the Larsen Empire. Ellie nodded in response. I understand. She held the list that His Majesty Lu Feng gave her in her hand. Suddenly she had a question. But young master, if we go to sea and cannot avoid the storm sea, what then? She said as she recalled the tragic scene of the storm sea. Some time ago, I received a war report from Yadian City. It was said that the fleets of the Toa Empire and the Larsen Empire were both severely damaged in the storm sea. Although our fleets are much better than those outside, I still see that there are many hidden dangers. Lu Feng just smiled after hearing that and gently replied to Ellie. Don't worry, we have experts to deal with things like this. While he was exchanging hours with Ellie, Nicole's loud voice came from outside the door. Your Majesty, Billis has arrived. Lu Feng replied warmly. Let her in. Billis with her sea blue hair wavy. She saluted Lu Feng. Greetings, Your Majesty. Lu Feng stood up at this moment. He walked in front of Billis and spoke to her with concern and seriousness. It's been a long time since I've seen Billis. Okay, I won't beat around the bush anymore. We're preparing to go out to sea to trade. At the same time, we need to gather intelligence from the Fabro Empire, everyone's enemy. But as everyone knows, the storm sea is very dangerous, so I want to ask for the generous help of a merman. Billis happily agreed after hearing Lu Feng's request. Your Majesty, rest assured, you are our merman's benefactor. We will definitely do our best to help you with this kind of matter. Lu Feng was delighted. He handed Billis a stack of documents containing the entire contract. He said, that's good, these are the regulations I've drawn up. The remuneration and things to pay attention to, I've clearly stated them inside. Billis happily took the documents and thanked Lu Feng. You're too polite, Billis, I've heard this sentence too often. Billis also replied innocently and carefreely. Actually my father had clearly told me that. For Han Dynasty, we do not expect any remuneration, let alone dealing with Fabro. But Lu Feng was still very calm and handsome. He calmly replied to Billis's words. There is still danger, so there must be a reward. The rules cannot be broken. Billis obeyed. Yes, Your Majesty. Afterwards, Billis hugged the set of regulations and waved goodbye to Lu Feng and Nicole before leaving. Seeing the affection and trust that the merfolk had for the Han Dynasty, Lu Feng couldn't help but feel grateful. He thought to himself. It seemed that the Han Dynasty had reached a very high level of acceptance in the eyes of the merfolk. Maybe it was possible. Lu Feng's train of thought was interrupted by Ellie. After Ellie finished looking through the documents, she discovered a problem. She quickly called out to Lu Feng. Your Majesty Lu Feng, I have another problem. She said as she opened the document, examined it carefully, and reported it to Lu Feng. I saw that it was written in this document. The Larsen Empire and Toa are the kingdoms of elves and beastmen respectively. She continued to look at Lu Feng and spoke her mind. I don't think they're like us and the countries that recently signed the racial treaty. Our trading fleets travel thousands of miles across the ocean to trade. Isn't it too dangerous? Lu Feng seemed to have expected this. He replied to Ellie calmly. He knew this, so he planned to choose the beastmen and elves to go with these two ships. Ellie asked again. So does the young master have someone he wants to choose? Lu Feng just replied gently. Of course I do. Nina also asked curiously after hearing that. Who is it? Lu Feng did not reply, just turned his eyes full of confidence and light towards the door and replied. That person should be coming soon. Just then, Lelis's voice echoed from the hallway. Princess. Lu Feng heard Lelis's voice and quickly opened the door and poked his head out to ask. What happened? Lelisa did not reply. She clung tightly to Jenny's arms, her face panicked. She asked Jenny in surprise. Your Highness, why are you here? So this is Princess Jenny, she smiled and gently replied to Lelisa. That Lelisa, let me go first, you're affecting everyone. Yes, Lelisa bowed her head in response. Nina, Lu Feng, and Ellie stood in a row behind them, looking at the two of them, all three of them with their eyes wide open in surprise. Ellie, her mouth twisted as she spoke. She was actually a princess. As for Mina standing next to Lu Feng, her face grew long, looking a little jealous. She said, there are more and more princesses around His Majesty's young master. Seeing that everyone seemed unhappy about her hiding her identity, Princess Jenny spoke up with apologetic eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hide it from everyone. Actually, it doesn't matter whether I'm a princess or not. After all, my father hates me very much. While Jenny was explaining and worrying that everyone would reject her, Ellie interrupted. Okay, we won't reject you just because you're a princess, so don't worry too much. Instead, everyone here is a princess, you don't need to be polite, Jenny. Lelisa was still deep in thought, looking at Jenny with worry and contemplation. Lu Feng seemed to have noticed this as well. He watched Lelisa's expression intently, seemingly wanting to say something in his heart. Afterwards, Lu Feng sat alone with Lelisa at the conference room table. He spoke to Lelisa in a serious manner. In short, that's the situation. I'll give you a more detailed plan later. Lelisa replied firmly. I understand, Your Majesty. Rest assured, I will help you handle the matter of the spirit caravan perfectly. After talking about the spirit caravan, Lu Feng remembered what happened earlier. He asked Lelisa again, wondering. That's right, Lelisa, how did you get to know the princess of the empire, Larson? And why did you come to this continent? Lelisa just raised her teacup and softly replied to Lu Feng. Ha, Your Majesty, you secretly probed people like this, it will make me think too much. Furthermore, Lelisa's eyes suddenly became sharper. She continued. Furthermore, that was also a thing of the past. It doesn't matter anymore, what matters is that I am now the captain of the Han Dynasty army, am I not, Your Majesty? Well, Lu Feng's face shortened, he smiled affectionately, and replied shyly. She was right, her mouth said that, but Lu Feng's heart was like. Oh, it seems she doesn't want to say it. If she doesn't want to say it, then forget it, I won't force her anymore. Then, he spoke to Lelisa enthusiastically, handing a gift box to the table. He said, that's right, you're away this time, so I prepared a gift for you. I hope Lelisa, you'll like it. Lelisa took the gift box with her hand, her mouth excitedly responding. Oh, it seems like it's finally my turn as a spirit? The other little guys were already red-eyed with the new equipment of the other departments. Okay, Lu Feng is tempting Lelisa. Hurry up and open it. I promise you, this gift will be to your liking. Lelisa lifted the gift box, her face filled with anticipation. As soon as she opened the gift, she opened her eyes wide and exclaimed in surprise. What is this? Lu Feng now explained gently and thoroughly. This is a newly designed weapon from the Research and Development Department. I call it a precision rifle. You can absolutely call it a sniper rifle. The black sniper rifle, exquisitely crafted and modern, standing out in the gift box seemed to have already captured Lelisa's interest. In the Imperial Book of Feng, Lu Feng is lost in thought, pondering over his upcoming plan. Looking at the documents in his hand, Lu Feng monologued, the people of the Larson Empire have all been resolved as well as the people of Torola. Who should I choose, if it were a game? Lelisa is like a six-cornered all-rounder. So it was completely fine for her to lead the caravan to Larson alone. If it were anyone else, it would not be appropriate. Saying that, there are too many beastmen with useless skill points around me, right? Ellie can't go to Torola either. Besides, I can't let her go there either. Via can't split herself now either, her project is at a crucial moment. Lu Feng sighed tiredly, fell back on the chair and said, what should we do? From the door, Ellie happily ran over, young master. Ellie smiled and said, the stone bridge number 1 of the Yutui River has been cleared. Lu Feng stood up happily, is that so, it's finally done. Ellie continued, the people were all happy, the pontoon bridge could still be used before, but there was a limit to its endurance. Now that the stone bridge was built, it was much more convenient. Lu Feng continued to say with satisfaction, in the future, our vehicles will increase, the pontoon bridge is just a temporary solution and cannot be used forever. Later, when the survey work of the construction department is completed, the design department will make more bridge plans, and prepare when necessary. Ellie understood and replied, yes. Looking at the pile of documents on the table, Ellie asked, young master, are you having a headache about choosing someone to go to Torola? Lu Feng replied, yes. Once the Chamber of Commerce leaves our Han Dynasty, it will temporarily become an independent group. The leader of the team must possess the intelligence to lead everyone, and must also have certain organizational abilities. Ensuring that the team operates according to an organized plan and that the team completes its tasks. Such people are not easy to find. Ellie looked at the information about everyone in her hand for a moment and then replied, I have someone again. Lu Feng immediately said, tell me. Ellie took out the CV of a white-haired beastman, saying, Shirley. Young master, actually the last half of the stone bridge project was handled by Shirley, although Buff and I helped. But it cannot be denied that she did a great job in many places. So, just by giving her this task, it can be considered as a training session. Lu Feng looked at the information sheet in his hand and replied. If it was Shirley, I would have considered it, but she is still a bit immature right now. But since you have recommended her, if there is no one else, then just choose her. Lu Feng looked at the information, thought, personality was a bit weak, interacting with people of the trade association still had some shortcomings. At this moment, Shirley was sitting in her office, dealing with a mountain of paperwork. At this moment, a girl in a black dress with brown hair ran over and said, "Shirley, the stone bridge inauguration ceremony was very well arranged today." "It's been a long time." Shirley immediately stood up and replied, "No, it's not hard. It's all thanks to everyone's help that I've been able to do it." The girl smiled and said, "Okay, don't be so nervous, we're all colleagues." Shirley shyly replied, "Yeah." Then she looked at the calendar marked at number 10. The girl asked, "Right, what day did she mark on the calendar?" Shirley replied immediately. Her face was very happy. "This is the day my family comes to Changan City." The girl congratulated her. "Really, congratulations." At the same time, in Yadian City, City Lord Ngudai was receiving a group of merchants and said, "I understand everyone's intentions." Miss Rose immediately said, "Then may I ask Lord Nyo, may we go ashore?" Duke Leinard also replied, "This is very important to us, now we." Lord Nyo immediately interrupted and replied, "Don't worry, there's no need to be nervous. We welcome guests who come to do business peacefully." Nyoda was recalling his conversation with His Majesty Lu Feng in his mind. Lu Feng said, "Nyoda, after I leave, if there are merchants who want to go ashore, I can allow them. But they must register properly." Nyoda was a little surprised but still replied, "Yes, but here." Lu Feng continued, "I understand your concerns. But we can't stay like this forever. My plan is to transform Haiyan City into a foreign trade port." Nyo Dai understood and replied, "Yes, I understand." Nyo Dai's answer made Lady Rose and Duke Leinard happy. "Really, that's great." But they didn't have time to rejoice for long. The two of them were pulled back to reality by Nyoda. "However, you must abide by the laws of the Han Dynasty. You are not allowed to bring weapons into the city. Your weapons must be kept. They must be returned after you leave. Also, if we find out that you are doing something you shouldn't be doing other than business, then..." The Duke immediately spoke up to assure Lord Nyo, "Rest assured, we are not that kind of people." Lord Nyo replied, "Please register. This is the prescribed procedure. After the verification is complete, everyone is free to go ashore." The two were happy. "Yes, thank you Lord Nyo." In the imperial port city of Yadian, people were entering the inner city in rows. Princess Field, from above, was watching the group. Then the soldier came to report, "Your Highness, most of the people did as we asked. Disguised as farmers, they returned. A small number are still on the road. Perhaps in 2 days, all of them will be gathered." Another soldier came and said, "Your Highness, the people from the main church have arrived again." The princess turned her head and glared. These people really couldn't wait. "Deacon Hong, how are the maps of the cities I requested?" Deacon Hong reports, "They are on the way. They are expected to arrive this afternoon." The princess replied with satisfaction, "Very good. Give the order to the army that was selected earlier to set out with the people of the divine cult master. Just listen to their arrangements first. When the time is right, the team will attack the divine cult together with me." The subordinate obeyed and replied, "Yes." Deacon Hong stepped forward and asked, "Your Highness," the princess turned to look and replied, "Is there anything else?" Deacon Hong continued, "I heard that the fleet of the Larson and Toa Empires has arrived at the Han Dynasty." The princess was surprised. "What?" "At Changan City railway station." Shirley hurriedly got off the carriage. Said to the driver. The driver kept the change. She ran away in panic. In her mind she blamed herself. She had clearly woken up an hour earlier. But she was still stuck in traffic. "I'm not picking them up. They absolutely shouldn't be running around." She ran as fast as she could to the door of the train station waiting room and called out loudly, "Duh!" The old cleaning staff turned to look at her and replied, "Oh dear. Did the young lady come to pick someone up? They've all left." After hearing that, she shouted in surprise, "What?" Then she asked in a low voice and urgently, "So, may I ask if you saw the 3 little beastmen and horsemen? They got in the car by themselves. I went to pick them up. But there was a traffic jam on the road. It was their first time coming to Changan City. I was afraid of them." Before she could finish speaking, an arm reached out and touched her. She turned around. Behind her were her 3 younger siblings. The eldest immediately said, "Ah. Sister Shirley. Long time no see." The 2 younger ones also happily said, "Sister." On the streets of Changan City, she was leading the 3 children back to her residence. The 2 children looked at the street excitedly. They shouted happily, "Wow. So many people. Big city. Seeing that, the older sister Diao immediately shouted. Hey, don't run around. Especially on the road. It's dangerous there. The two children immediately stopped and replied, yes. Then turned to Shirley and said. As expected, the child is naughty. He didn't feel tired after walking all the way. Shirley smiled and replied. Duh. Was the journey tiring? Diao immediately replied excitedly. No, I'm very excited. I didn't expect that in just a few years, the outside world has changed so much. That's right. Can I buy a newspaper? Also, I want to go to the money shop. Shirley asked in surprise. How do you know about newspapers and money shops? Diao replied, I received a newspaper that someone threw on the ground before. But that seemed to be an old newspaper. Thanks to that, I learned about the concept of this city. But I still want to see the latest news. Shirley happily agreed. Ha ha. Okay. Thinking in her head, as expected of a descendant of a merchant, her ability to absorb knowledge is much stronger than mine. At Shirley's house, she had just brought the three children back. She opened the door and walked in, saying, We're here. This is our home. Looking at the spacious and bright house, the two children were excited. They ran over and lay down on the sofa. Diao, carrying the luggage, walked behind and praised her. You bought a house in Changan City so quickly. She immediately explained, No? This is the unit assigned to you. His Majesty made the policy. Civil servants like you will be assigned a house and live there first. Although it is small, it is fully furnished. The kids were still curious about the new things here. Looking at the faucet. They said, water, so powerful. Shirley raised her hands to the sky. She said happily, most importantly, we don't need to worry or be afraid here anymore. Diao also added. Sister Shirley. You've worked hard. Shirley smiled and said. Okay, let's go. We have a lot of things to buy. In the supermarket, while Diao and Shirley were shopping, a female employee came over and said. Excuse me, Shirley. There is something I need you to confirm. She turned her head and asked, What is it? The female employee continued. But don't worry. I have already delivered the documents. There is something to take care of. Shirley handed the money bag and said to Diao. You stay here first. Go for a walk. Here is the money bag. I will be over soon. Diao took the money bag and said. This is work, right? I know. You go quickly. Diao walked around the supermarket alone. There were many strange things here. Looking around, Diao exclaimed. Changan City. Full of things she had never seen before. Holding quality items in her hands. She thought. And they were too expensive. Couldn't they be cheaper? At this moment, a female employee came over and said, Dear customer, do you need any help? If there is anything you don't understand, I can help you. Diao turned back and exclaimed, Miss. I want to ask you something. If this thing is sold out, how much reward can you get? The employee's eyes widened in surprise. Ha! At this time, at the stall next door, Lu Feng and Ellie checked. Ellie held the list in her hand and said, Young master. If so, the caravan's goods will be these. Lu Feng immediately replied. Just arrange it like this. Then he noticed Diao and the employee's conversation. The employee was embarrassed and awkwardly replied. This young lady. I can't control this matter. Let me go ask the manager. Diao immediately replied. Go. But hurry. I still have to go to the next line. The employee brought the goods to ask the manager. The manager was surprised and said, Really? Lu Feng happened to come over and ask. What happened? The staff turned and greeted, Your Majesty Lu Feng. Miss Ellie. Then the story was told, like this. The other customer said she was from the Torola merchant group. She said she had a big order to negotiate with me. Here I am. I was planning to go there to discuss it with her. Lu Feng suddenly replied. Really? Then thought. That's not right. Isn't Torola's caravan from Yadian City? Could it be that they can run faster than me? Nothing has been discovered yet. Lu Feng turned around and replied. Leave this to me. The manager immediately agreed. Yes. Lu Feng walked up to Diao and said, Miss, I am the manager of this shop. I heard that you are a merchant of the Torola Chamber of Commerce, right? How can I help you? Diao saw Lu Feng walk up and say that. He immediately replied, "Hello, Guild Master, I am Guild Master Crocker." "Did you know? He entrusted me to pick goods to bring back to the Empire. So I am going to pick goods now. But there are so many good things here. Especially this one. It is truly a treasure. I can predict that it will shine on the other side of the ocean." Lu Feng immediately replied. "Thanks for the compliment." Diao took out 2 different bottles of goods. Said. "But the budget the guild leader gave me is limited. I bought these. I don't have enough money to buy this." Lu Feng replied with a surprised expression. "Is that so?" Diao continued. "So I want to ask the manager. Can you sell this to me at a discount? I can guarantee that the items I choose here will be a big order in 3 days." Lu Feng immediately replied. "What are you thinking? I already know. I understand. It seems like she wants to borrow the name of the trade association to buy at a cheap price. I don't know where she found out about the trade association. But she can think of taking advantage of this. It's also very smart. If it was a normal employee at the store, she probably would have agreed. After all, the amount of goods is very large. Still very promising." Shirley had finished her work and waved happily. "Duh. I'm home." But seeing Lu Feng and Ellie standing there, Shirley stuttered. "Your Majesty." Lu Feng replied. "So you know this person?" "Shirley." Diao saw her sister calling the manager Your Majesty. She screamed in horror. "What?" Dio sweated. He stammered. "Sorry. Me." Lu Feng immediately said. "Don't be nervous. I want to know. Where did you find out about the Torola Chamber of Commerce? Why did you think of using its name?" Diao replied excitedly. "Of course, it was from the newspaper that His Majesty published." Lu Feng was surprised. "Report?" Diao continued. He. It was a habit I had from doing business with my father. When I went to another place, I couldn't help but gather information. Then use this information to do some business?" Lu Feng replied with satisfaction. "Surely, there is something I would like to discuss with you and this young lady. Are you both free now?" Everyone returned to the imperial residence. Here, Shirley kept apologizing. "Your Majesty, I'm very sorry about what happened earlier. I didn't mean it." Lu Feng smiled and replied. "Don't worry. I don't mind. I invited you and Shirley here for another reason." The 2 girls asked with wide eyes. "Something else?" "Your Majesty, what is it?" Ellie brought some documents. She gave them to Diao and said, "Here, take a look." Diao took them and replied, "Thank you." "Read the document in hand." Diao said. "Oh, business activities?" Lu Feng immediately replied. "Yes. Mainly to deliver the Han Dynasty's letter of authority to the Torola Empire. At the same time, conduct business in the Torola Empire. I think you are a very suitable person. Therefore, I would like to invite you to be the person in charge of the trade delegation to Torola. There will be corresponding remuneration later. You can take a look at it first." Diao and Shirley studied carefully. Answer. Yes. Okay. Looking at the amount of money paid, the 2 girls were speechless with shock. Diao stammered. "This. 10. 100. 1,000. 10,000. That's a lot. That's a lot of money." Shirley also added. "Your Majesty. This number isn't written wrong, right?" Diao stood up and said. "Your Majesty, if I guess correctly, there is actually another business behind this. It's just that you hope to have a lively front to cover it up." Lu Feng replied indifferently, "There are a few words, there's no need to say them out loud. More specifically, I will have to wait for your consent before I can tell you. But I can also guarantee that I will do my best to minimize the danger. And you are only responsible for the caravan." Diao heard and replied. "I understand." She understood in her heart, which meant she just needed to act well as a qualified businessman and not worry about the future. The other side of the ocean. Foreign markets, new customs, new world. Although it was dangerous, wasn't that what I wanted? Diao's eyes lit up, filled with interest. Then she stood up and said firmly. "Your Majesty, I agree, but I also have my request." Lu Feng happily agreed, "You say it." Diao continued, "My sister's house is too small now, can you arrange a bigger house for us? Preferably 4 bedrooms and a living room." Diao's words made Shirley's eyes widen in surprise. Diao coquettishly said, Sister Shirley, you don't want the four of us to be crowded into a small room. Shirley immediately felt embarrassed and complained, but she couldn't make a request to His Majesty. Lu Feng happily replied, it's okay, I agree. Tomorrow, after Ellie helps everyone find a place, everyone can move in. Diao happily replied, oh, thank you, Your Majesty, I will definitely do well. Shirley still replied a little unhappy, thank you, Your Majesty. Then Diao turned back and smiled smugly at Shirley, who was sighing. Then Shirley said softly, but it had to be like that, it was like she had found something she was interested in again. Diao was excited, Your Majesty, can I ask about the specific details of the mission now? Lu Feng replied, of course. At the food distribution site, the distributor calls, next person. The person receiving the food immediately said loudly, what, today there is only a little, not enough to eat. Immediately, the people handing out the food shouted, there is only this much, if you don't need it, don't obstruct the people behind. The beast man angrily grabbed the collar of the food delivery man and said loudly, I came to fight, not to starve, did you guys hide the food? The people behind were panicked, what are you doing, don't do it. The food delivery man was scared, don't touch the food. Outside there was a commotion, the second prince went into the tent and said to the first prince, brother, outside there is a commotion again because of food. The first prince heard this and angrily replied with a dark face, can't these people stop? The second prince immediately reassured him, don't worry, I've stopped it, but continuing like this is not the way. Now the morale of the army has wavered, just yesterday there were 56 fights, and it continues like this. The crown prince gritted his teeth in anger, he knew, he was also thinking of a way. But the weapons were confiscated, and there was also a problem with food. We had no weapons or food, and we were turned away outside the city. What else could we do? The two princes sat down to think of a solution, but not long after, the eldest prince shouted loudly and left. He couldn't think of anything and had a headache. He went into the city to drink wine. Two people ran in from outside the door, and a subordinate said, my lord, the people from Yadian City have arrived. The person from Yadian City said, Your Highnesses, the city lord told me to bring a group of knights to Yadian City. The first prince immediately came forward and asked, what are you sending them to Yadian City for? The other person replied, Your Highness, rest assured, it's just road repairs. We will do nothing to your knight. According to our previous agreement, in order to prevent people from lacking food, we will provide certain jobs for people to earn food. This time, we will provide work for Yadian City, probably needing about 2,000 people. The crown prince stroked his chin and thought, so that's how it is. He thought to himself, 2,000 people, can save quite a bit, and also earn some to return. Then he agreed, okay, then you call someone yourself. The person from Yadian City bowed his head and replied, yes, then I will take my leave. As he turned away, he looked back at the happy first prince and said, let's go, the food problem is solved, let's go drink. The second prince replied, yes, big brother. In the Yadian kingdom, the army of the supreme god was advancing forward. In the temple, a subordinate was asking, my lord, have the Fabro Empire knights ever disobeyed our commands? The archbishop immediately replied, they are just scapegoats, we don't need their loyalty. Hoping that nothing would happen, the army continued to march forward with great momentum. But they did not know that in the bushes, there were soldiers lying in ambush. Yadian Empire, the army of the patriarch is marching. From the bushes, two people are hiding, drawing their bows, shooting towards the army of the patriarch. At this moment, an arrow flew out, flying straight towards the sect master. Blood splattered, the arrow pierced through the body of a person, the sect master. The person walking beside him was frightened. Before he could do anything, a series of arrows flew from all directions. The priests and soldiers ran in panic, quickly holding up their shields to defend themselves, but to no avail. Those men shouted, there's an enemy attack, there's an enemy in the forest. The commander of the Yadian army's vanguard heard the commotion behind him and asked his subordinates. What's going on over there? Why is it so noisy? A subordinate ran up in a panic, shouting loudly to inform the master, sir, the team behind was attacked. The leader was startled and couldn't believe it, shouting loudly, what? Then he turned his horse to the rear, commanding the soldiers, everyone, the entire army to charge. But before he could do anything, from afar came a mighty sound, kill, kill, kill. A troop of yellow flags, with a fierce aura, blocked in front of him. His face changed color, not believing what he saw, people, Fabro's people. On the other side, the vanguard was being beaten to a pulp by Fabro's army, the sound of fighting echoed in the air, don't. On this side, the central army of Yadian heard the movement on the other side, the entire army could not help but panic. The Grand Master inside the palanquin heard the noise, lifted the curtain, and asked the subordinate beside him, where did the noise come from, what was going on? A subordinate rode up, panicked and announced, Field's army has betrayed us. The Grand Master of the Divine Sect frowned upon hearing this, opened his mouth wide, and shouted, what? He looked out and ordered his troops to suppress immediately. Field stood up and dared to do this. Before the Archbishop could finish speaking, another subordinate rushed over and reported, "My lord the Archbishop, the rear guard has also been attacked. We are surrounded. There is another group of soldiers charging towards us." The Grand Master heard the news and broke out in a sweat, not knowing what to do. Here. On the other side, a battle was taking place between the army of the Pope and the army of Fabro. From afar, two people were galloping over. One of them said, "Sir, up ahead is Yadian's place." Deacon Hong sat on horseback and replied, "Okay." Then he turned around and told the army behind him, "Don't fight, kill them, capture Yad, regardless of life or death." The army behind him shouted in unison, "Yes." A man rode forward, pointed at the carriage and said, "See it, that's the carriage. Get in, brothers." He said and flew his sword, his face filled with joy and excitement, "Charge, the reward is ours." But before he could stab down, he was slashed away by a sword, leaving no last words. From the dust, a tall-looking person walked out and spoke to the group of Hong Deacon. The God Master once said that force is a sin, but the God Master also said that the power to fight for the gods will exempt one from all sins. The one who said that was a tall man, leading a group of priests. He shouted, "Priest, please guide me with strength, forgive my sins." On the other side, the priests of the main god sect went crazy, their faces were all distorted as they killed people, and after killing, they shouted loudly to the sky. The followers of the main god sect, all before them, was the test sent down by the main god sect, bravely face it. Having said that, the group of people continued to fight tirelessly, still shouting, after that, victory, fight for the god, kill. On the mountain above, Princess Field and her subordinates witnessed everything. A subordinate reported, "Your Highness, the people of the divine cult are more tenacious than we thought." Another said, "Your Highness, Deacon Hong was intercepted by the people of the divine cult." Princess Field said coldly, using religious beliefs to stimulate the soldiers' fighting spirit, "This is the trump card of the religion." Then Field ordered, "Grey Deacon, Deacon White, we go." Grey Deacon and Deacon White nodded and said, "Yes." On the side of the Pope's army, the instructors are still stimulating everyone's will, there's no need to fear them. They are nothing more than weak infidels, the gods will not protect them, us. Speaking up to here, the instructor was stabbed to death, still saying that they would fight in the end. Before he could finish his sentence, he collapsed. The subordinates below were scared and shouted in disbelief, "My lord, pastor." Before the cult leaders could regain their composure, a group of bald men rushed from afar, holding weapons and slashing at the cult leaders. The beheaded priest screamed in pain, but still did not forget to shout, "Guilty, AAA, the judgment of the gods." On the other side, Deacon Hong, with a tense face, spoke with hatred, hateful. In Deacon Hong's mind, if he didn't stop them, he would miss the opportunity to fight, but how could he win against this group of monsters? The priest holding the hammer, just killed a soldier, and said, "Accept the punishment of the gods, you unbeliever." A whistling sound was heard, a long chain was flying towards the hammer-wielding priest. The chain quickly wrapped around the other guy's neck, not giving him time to react and tightening. A group of bald men rushed towards him, some holding chains, some holding spears. At this moment, the spear pierced his body, he let out a loud scream, blood spurted from the punctured area like a fountain. Deacon Hong saw this scene, doubtful, Grey Coat White. This is the team of Grey Deacon and Deacon White. In the eyes of Deacon Hong was the image of the cult leaders being chained, some even having their bodies pierced by chains. Blood splattered everywhere, at a speed as fast as a blink of an eye, almost all the cult leaders here were wiped out. Deacon Hong couldn't help but sigh, so strong. This is the team that His Highness has been secretly training. Meanwhile, on the other side of the mountain, the subordinate reported the situation to Princess Field. "Report, Your Highness, Grey Deacon and Deacon White have captured Yad alive. The other enemies have been defeated." Field's cold face gradually became cheerful and smiled. "Very good. At Haiyan Port. The sky was blue, the wind was light and cool, and the sunshine was bright. Today was a perfect day to go out to sea. Right down at the port, a ship was preparing to set sail, people were bustling about. An army was lining up, preparing for this departure. Duke Leinard said, "Over there, the fleet will surely set off with us." "Ha, interesting, first came to attack them. Now the result is taking them home." Pink-haired elf, Miss Rose added beside, who said, "We can't beat them." "Not far from the two of them," Lu Feng said, "we're almost leaving. I'll give them a few instructions." Lu Feng then spoke to three people, Diao, Gaba, and Lelisa. "Toa Empire, because we hold their prince in our hands, they dare not act rashly against us. But, careful investigation is indispensable. If necessary, the things I left on the steamboat, no need to save, just use." Gaba confidently raised his muscular arm and said, "Rest assured, Your Majesty, I will definitely protect Miss Diao." Diao beside him was also happy and gave Gaba a thumbs up. Lu Feng saw this and was also relieved. Well, it will be hard for you when the time comes, Gaba. Lu Feng turned to Lelisa and said, Lelisa, your side. But before he could speak, Lelisa interrupted him, don't worry. Larson has me, you don't need to worry about Larson, wait for my good news. Lu Feng nodded, okay. Then he continued, in short, all actions, everyone's safety is the most important. If in danger, can abandon the mission. The three people, Diao, Gaba, and Lelisa nodded in agreement. Yes, I know. Shirley raised her hand to pat Diao's head and said with a smile, Diao, take good care of yourself. Diao laughed and replied, don't worry, Sister Shirley. Wait for our good news. Lu Feng said, let's go, and then the group of people boarded the boat. The steamboat with its chimneys slowly set sail. On one boat, two sailors happily pulled the sails, and the two happily shouted, let's go, quickly, follow your majesty's fleet, new continent, I'm coming. Then all the ships went out into the ocean, to another place. After everyone left, Lu Feng and the three returned to the castle. Shirley was still teary-eyed, looking at the boat in the distance with reluctance, while Lu Feng and Mina talked to each other. Lu Feng asked Mina, did Jones and Avery also leave? Mina said, yes, yesterday they followed the plan and snuck into the merchant fleet. But young master, can't we really slow down the construction of the bank? Lu Feng closed his eyes and slowly explained to Mina, how should I say this, in the future, it will be an important part of our insurance, although it's not effective yet. Mina was suspicious, insurance, but young master, isn't the purpose of a money house for convenience, it's not safe to carry money across the ocean for transactions. Lu Feng patted Mina's head and smiled in response. Explaining this matter wasn't difficult. Then Lu Feng turned his head back and called out to Shirley, who was still in tears, Shirley, explain. Shirley heard this and was surprised, so she quickly turned around and said, yes. Shirley then explained that, in His Majesty's words, if we successfully open a bank on the other side, perhaps many people will use it. Once war breaks out, we just need to take the bank's assets away. Mina replied, that's not it. Before Mina could speak, Lu Feng replied, so the Chamber of Commerce is just a cover. Our real purpose is to let Jones and Avery successfully build a bank. Lu Feng looked into the distance, hoping that everything would go smoothly. Somewhere, Nyode approached and informed Lu Feng of the situation. Your Majesty, the human and beast fleets of Lingu City have also split into half. The army will escort our fleet as they depart. Lu Feng asked Nyode how to arrange the remaining half. Nyode replied, yes, the remaining person has joined the construction team, and besides each person, there is at least one of us. According to the plan, in less than 3 months, the elite soldiers of that beast kingdom will be completely reformed by us. Lu Feng happily nodded and replied, okay, the beastmen on the other side are working hard, discussing with each other. A beastman said, let me tell you, working at Han Dynasty, that's the salary. The beastman was very surprised when he heard that, and asked doubtfully, is it true or false? Then, Nyode seemed to remember something and asked Lu Feng, but your Majesty, that beast prince, how do we arrange it? Lu Feng rested his chin on his hand and thought for a moment, well, what about him, as long as you don't die, nothing else matters. Lu Feng then turned and left. Nyode greeted Lu Feng and replied, yes. Lu Feng stretched and yawned loudly, saying to Shirley and Mina, let's go, back to Changan City, there are still many things to handle. A day later, at Lu Feng's office, Ellie was giving papers and reporting the situation to Lu Feng. Lu Feng received the papers and replied, this policy, just push it in this direction. Ellie replied, yes, young master. A high heel clicked on the floor. Mina walked in from outside and shouted, young master, there is news from Yadian, it is bad news. Mina is holding a scroll in her hand. Lu Feng was surprised and asked doubtfully, what? Ellie hurriedly asked worriedly, did something happen to Timothy? Mina shook her head and continued, it had nothing to do with her. Ellie realized the problem, the big matter in Yadian had nothing to do with her. Was she really the queen of Yadian? After reading the report Mina brought in, Lu Feng nodded and replied, so that's how it was. Ellie still didn't know what happened and asked suspiciously, young master, what happened? Lu Feng said, Field cancelled the cooperation with Yad, the two sides are fighting. Mina added, now Field controls the main priest Yad of the main priesthood, occupying the royal capital Yadian. According to our information, the forces under the main priesthood have started to move. Lu Feng pondered, he thought to himself. The people of the God sect, without their grandmaster, are afraid that they will fall into chaos. Although Field can blackmail Yad, he is afraid that he cannot support Yadian. It seems that Yadian is in chaos. The question is it necessary for the Han Dynasty to seize benefits from this aspect? Lu Feng asked Ellie, what is Timothy doing now? Ellie replied, she is now in the south of Yadian, reorganizing her territory. The situation is much better than here. Lu Feng gave the order, relaying this message to Timothy, to get her attention. Mina asked, young master, what about us? Lu Feng smiled and replied, sitting still watching the changes, watching a great play. In the capital of Yadian, Zene City, black smoke billowed from the buildings. Princess Field sat on the high castle, drinking tea while listening to the report of Deacon Hong standing next to her. Deacon Hong bowed his head and said, "Your Highness, the entire resistance army has been annihilated, the royal capital is ours now." Princess Field heard this and said, "You've worked hard, how are the other directions?" When asked, Deacon Hong flipped through the report and replied, "Yes." Grey Deacon, Deacon White successfully took the second and third cities of Yadian. At the same time, selected a group of men to start training, who came to actively participate. Among all the people gathered in that crowd, 3 men who raised their hands the highest were noticed. "It all depends on your Highness's scheme." Hearing that, Princess Field chuckled, turned to glance at the person kneeling on the ground and said, "We should thank the Archbishop, right, Archbishop?" The Yad priest was kneeling on the ground at this moment, his face scowling with hatred and cursing. "Field, you will pay, the god will definitely punish you." Princess Field raised her hand to brush the dust off the table, her face expressionless as she replied. "Alright, take your nonsense back. It's not like we haven't had people like you in Fabrox, but we've long since pushed them into the trash heap of history." One of them brought Archbishop Yad to his knees and pointed at him in front of the people, while Princess Field's voice was still heard. "You priests have been squeezing this place dry for too long, and we only need to develop non-divine things. It will be easy to provoke those who have long been dissatisfied with you, but are afraid of divine punishment." In front of the Archbishop, there were people pointing angrily, he looked until he was sweating. Finally, perhaps unable to bear it any longer, Archbishop Yad coldly snorted and turned away. Princess Field didn't say much more and immediately gave the order, "Pull him down and keep an eye on him. We still need him to complete his plan to clean up this city." The subordinate heard this and immediately accepted the order. Princess Field now held a cup of tea in one hand and raised the other hand to continue asking Deacon Hong to report other news. Hong accepted the order and nodded, then picked up the report and continued reading. Now the remaining forces of the Patriarch are all reorganizing their troops. But according to intelligence, there is now a huge division within them, arguing over who will succeed the position of Grand Patriarch. Furthermore, a conflict had arisen between the 2 most powerful Grand Masters, and war might break out. The leaders of the 2 factions did not even look at each other, while their subordinates were arguing with each other. Princess Field's face looked satisfied, indeed. Next news. Deacon Hong continued speaking. More news came from the Han Dynasty. Hearing this, Princess Field suddenly fell silent, her hand cupping the steaming cup of hot tea, indicating that she wanted to hear more details. Deacon Hong continued reading. The Han Dynasty sent a merchant fleet to the Toa and Larson empires, wanting to develop cross-ocean trade. At that moment, Princess Field suddenly raised her head to investigate. How did the Han Dynasty know about the train route? Deacon Hong hesitated a bit as he answered. It was said that Toa and Larson's fleet had provided the route, and they had also paid a large fine for fighting in the battle. Hearing that, Princess Field frowned and bit her lips. Deacon Hong saw that her expression was not good but still had to say more. "Your Highness, if the Han Dynasty takes this opportunity to ally with Toa and Larson, it will be very bad for us. Originally, those 2 countries formed an alliance, our interests were already tied up, if the Han Dynasty was added." According to Deacon Hong, on the map, Larson and Toa were the 2 countries at the bottom, while Fabro was located between 3 countries including the Han Dynasty. Larson and Toa, if these 3 countries formed an alliance, Fabro's chance of turning things around would be almost 0. Speaking of this, Deacon Hong tried to make a suggestion. "Your Highness, why don't we ask for help from His Majesty and speed up our conquest of the Han Dynasty?" Considering this proposal for a moment, Princess Field immediately replied, "I feel there is no need to rush." She closed her eyes and thought, with my understanding of Toa and Larson, regardless of whether they are narrow-minded beastmen or elves with superior appearances, they will definitely have to suffer a great loss against the Han Dynasty before they can properly sit at the negotiating table. Suddenly Princess Field opened her eyes, her face sinister and cold. "At that time, Fabro and I will take advantage of the open space to infiltrate those beastmen or elves." After hearing this, Deacon Hong laughed and said, "So that's how it is. If we can capture Larson and Toa in one go, His Majesty the King will definitely be very happy. I will report to His Majesty the King." But contrary to the mood of the Red Deacon, Princess Field folded her arms and coldly stopped him, saying there was no need. "Intelligence achievements and actual achievements are 2 different concepts. What I need is actual achievements to increase the stakes for my future, understand?" Seeing the princess glaring at him, Deacon Hong was sweating in fear and quickly nodded his head in response, "Yes." After that, Princess Field waved her hand and ordered, "All right, you can leave." Deacon Hong did not dare to disobey, so he bowed his head respectfully and left. At this moment, only Princess Field was left alone. She tapped her fingers on the table, her eyes fixed on the steaming cup of tea as she thought about the urgent task. She still had to stand firm on this continent. Only with a stable foundation can one compete for greater war results later, so his current plan is not wrong. However, speaking of which, at the same time, coming into contact with Torola and Larson, even Lu Feng, would be under a lot of pressure. Thinking of this, Princess Field immediately let out a disdainful laugh, really wanting to see how he would look like if he couldn't eat or sleep well. In Changan City, the scene was as peaceful as any other day. In front of the news bulletin board, a crowd was gathered to watch. Someone in the crowd spoke up, "What good things does your majesty have?" Another person in the crowd said, "I heard your majesty is preparing for the summer." The person who just spoke turned around and read out loud the message written on the board. The notice board said, "Dear citizens, in order to cope with the hot weather, Changan City will open the swimming pool in 3 days. Please wait." Someone who heard this pointed at a strange structure behind the notice board and asked suspiciously, "What is the structure behind?" Another person couldn't help but ask curiously, "Swimming pool. Can't wait." The scene showed a face wearing shiny black glasses. This was our Han Dynasty king. He was wearing only a pair of black shorts, his six-pack body was visible. On his face was a pair of shiny glasses, his hands on his hips, smiling, revealing his white teeth, and exclaiming. Indeed, when talking about summer, the thing that makes people most nostalgic is the swimming pool. In front of Lu Feng was the swimming pool that people were talking about now. The clear blue water gave a cool feeling. Standing in the Changan City swimming pool for a while, Mina suddenly called out, "Young master." Lu Feng looked at the people who had just appeared. Although he was wearing glasses that obscured his eyes, he could not hide the red cheeks on his face. He opened his mouth and exclaimed, "Oh, everyone is so beautiful." Opposite Lu Feng were the girls wearing very hot bikinis. Nicole, in a purple and blue outfit, said with a red face, "Wearing this in front of the young master, it always felt new." Dees, without any shame, just innocently asked, "Is this a swimsuit?" Ellie felt no different from Nicole. Her face was red, her arms crossed in front of her chest. She asked awkwardly, Really, why wear a swimsuit? Wouldn't it be better to wear the clothes she already had?" Yuffie stood next to Ellie, a white cloth covering her inner clothes. She didn't say anything, but her face was red just like Ellie and Nicole. Lu Feng had already walked over to everyone. He took off his sunglasses, patted Ellie's head, and answered Ellie's question with a smile. Of course it wasn't good. After all, normal clothes would be seen in the water. Ellie's face turned even redder when she heard Lu Feng say that, and a hot smoke came out of her head. She was confused and said something. Mina saw that and joined in teasing, "So that's it, I thought the young master had a new hobby." Ellie turned back to look at Mina but absolutely couldn't argue any further. Ellie turned back and didn't even look at the two people who had just teased her. Mina also felt that she had joked too much, so she spoke up to mediate. Yuffie, still wearing her white robe, shyly said to Lu Feng, "Your Majesty Lu Feng, thank you for inviting me here." Even though she said that, in her head she kept screaming, "So embarrassing." Lu Feng didn't know what Yuffie was thinking, so he smiled lightly and told her to just consider it a relaxing vacation. She had worked hard during this time. Yuffie didn't say anything more after hearing that. She just hesitantly replied, Everyone went down to the pool together. A figure jumped down with great force. It was Dees. Ellie nearby immediately shouted, "Hey Dees, keep your movements down." At the pool, Mina and Lu Feng were sunbathing on the beds that were commonly seen at the beach. Nicole, holding a tray of water and a glass, placed it next to Lu Feng and said, "Young master, once the pool opens, it will probably attract a lot of people." Mina, who was lying next to him, agreed. "A place where we can swim to cool off, then we won't have to worry about the whole city being so hot that it will lose its vitality." Nicole heard that and added, "If only the street outside could be this cool." Hearing that, Mina smiled and remembered that it was so hot earlier that several people from the security department fainted while on surveillance. As for Lu Feng, he ate the fruit and presented his idea. He had also thought about this before, planning to build a water truck in Changan City. Mina seemed to not understand what a water truck was. After repeating these 3 words, she was a bit confused. Lu Feng called Yuffie, who was playing in the water near the pool, and asked if the fire department's fire truck had found it yet. Yuffie stopped playing with water when she heard the call and replied with a smile, I've completed the research." After that, Nicole gave her a plate of fruit and told her to eat it. Lu Feng turned to Mina and explained that fires don't always happen. When that happens, the fire trucks can change their nozzles and the water spraying in the city will lower the temperature. Hearing this, Mina finally understood. She concluded that this way, it would really be much cooler. Yuffie suddenly remembered something. She approached Lu Feng and pointed at a hand-cranked fan, saying, "That's right, Your Majesty. A resident suggested to us about a hand-cranked fan before." "Do you remember?" Lu Feng didn't know if he remembered or not. His expression was a bit reluctant as he asked Yuffie, "What's wrong?" Yuffie replied immediately, "I have already modified it, changed it to a design where pressing the handrail can start the fan. It is very popular now." Hearing Yuffie's story, Nicole also came to talk. "I remember that a while ago, someone also designed a greenhouse to shade the sun. I think that's suitable for an outdoor store. It can avoid the heat and also serve customers." Yuffie seemed to have found a confidant. She mentioned another invention. Someone was planning to use ice to make a cooling machine. Unfortunately, he didn't know the principle of ice. Nina lay there listening to the two people's conversation, her face a little tired from the heat as she sighed. This is great. When will someone be able to create something that can directly change temperature? Lu Feng also raised his hand to his chin as he listened to the two people talking. As expected, enjoyment is the driving force that pushes people forward. Then, Lu Feng put his hands together, put his head on his pillow, looked into the distance, thinking, calculating the date. The merchant ship should be arriving soon, wondering where they are. At the imperial port of Torola, ships gradually docked. With somewhat hurried steps, the black-haired man shouted loudly to inform the beastman in front of him of something he needed to know. My lord, there are monsters entering the port outside. The person called Sir heard this and turned around to look, then he couldn't help but be stunned. Oh my god, what is that? It was the giant ship from the Han Dynasty, standing in front of the ship. The beastman looked so small. Gabba stood on the ship and sighed. This port is not small. Diao standing next to Gabba on the other hand breathed a sigh of relief and said, we finally arrived, but this is too old compared to Changan City. Another person on the ship looked down at the harbor and saw many people holding weapons gathered at the harbor. He called out, everyone look over there are too many soldiers. Seeing this scene, Diao patted Gabba's hand and said, it seems the landlord doesn't welcome us very much. Gabba immediately reassured her. Don't worry, leave it to me. The soldiers gathered at the harbor were all amazed. The purple-haired beastman said, this ship is so big. The light brown-haired man agreed, yes, it seems to be made of iron. Another person wondered, can iron ships float on water? Hearing this question, the others looked at each other and shook their heads, saying they didn't know. Only the one called Sir had a slightly serious expression and thought. A bunch of idiots, how this boat floats doesn't matter at all, what matters is what the owner of this boat is here for. Diao, who had been on the boat for many days, finally set foot on land, but as soon as he set foot, someone pointed at him and asked, you who came down from the iron boat, who are you? Diao replied with a confident expression. Diao, the Han Dynasty diplomatic mission, the matter of two princes of your country attacking my country, came here to deliver the official letter from His Majesty Lu Feng, Emperor of my country. The port guard was still wondering why the Han Dynasty had anything to do with his country's beast prince. He opened his hand and asked, how do I know if the letter of authority is real or fake? Let me see. Diao did not respond to him. She loudly protested, telling him, this matter was related to the relations between the two countries. A port guard like him had no right to watch, a guard like him could not make the decision, find someone with power to come here. The other person couldn't help but shout angrily after hearing Diao's words. What did she say? The people behind also pointed their spears at Diao's group. Gabba was about to say something to console them, but Diao firmly stated that it was okay, he just wanted to scare us. The port guard saw Diao's attitude and turned his head to spit out two words, wait. When he turned his head and left, he glanced at Diao and thought to himself, if he wasn't scared, and he didn't show me that thing, it must not be fake. Gabba saw that the other guy compromised and immediately put his hand on Diao's shoulder to praise her. He couldn't tell that she was young, but her momentum was very strong. As soon as he finished speaking, Diao suddenly hugged Gabba and said tremblingly, hurry up and help me up, I'm about to lose my footing. Seeing her quick change, Gabba let out a light laugh and agreed. In the imperial capital of Torola, after receiving the report from the harbor guard just now, the king of Torola, Blake, was having his meal and couldn't help but ask again in doubt. The imperial letter also mentioned two princes. The harbor guard did not dare to lie, so he bowed his head and said, yes. Hearing this, the king clicked his tongue and said something vague. It seemed he had failed, then asked again, where are they? The harbor guard replied, at the port. He continued to bring the piece of meat from the fork close to his mouth, then gave orders, arranging for the receptionists. The harbor guard obeyed and left. Suddenly King Blake called him back and told him not to be too enthusiastic, nor to be late. The subordinate heard that and had a somewhat confused expression, but could only obey. At this time, in the Torola Imperial Palace, after hearing the report from his subordinate, King Blake rested his chin on his hand, deep in thought. The Han Dynasty was on the opposite shore, calculating from the time, his two sons should have arrived there long ago. Why did they send someone here now? Then, the Han Dynasty diplomatic delegation entered the palace to meet the king. The guard of the Torola kingdom shouted loudly, the Han Dynasty envoy has arrived. Diao put his hand on his chest, bowed his head respectfully, and greeted His Majesty Blake. King Torola raised his hand to greet him and replied, no formalities required. Then King Blake got straight to the point, asking, tell me, what's the matter with you? Diao chuckled and replied, this, you'll know right away if you look at His Majesty's letter. The courtier went down to get the letter and brought it to King Blake. He looked curious and said, bring it here, mysteriously. King Blake held the letter in his hand, his face beaming with joy, thinking to himself, so delicate, it seems his son did not do badly there. Then he opened the letter and read it, his face full of surprise, huh? Diao saw that and smiled slyly, her eyes were cold. Suddenly, King Blake sat up, clutching the letter of authority, his face full of anger. He shouted, "What? My son has entered the Han Dynasty." Diao heard and thought to herself, "The acting is really good." She sighed and then questioned back, "Could it be that your majesty doesn't know?" King Blake folded his arms behind his back, pretending to know nothing, and replied, "I don't know about this. How are they now?" Diao said proudly. "Your majesty, rest assured, we will not do anything too outrageous to the two princes, and have even arranged a castle for them to dock and rest." The king felt relieved after hearing this. He continued, "Okay, I will give you the compensation later, but the premise is that you must ensure the safety of my two sons." Diao assured him, "Please rest assured about this." Hearing this firm affirmation, the king felt quite relieved and expressed his intention to invite the guests. "Then, everyone, please feel free." The guard said to lead Diao and Gaba to rest. "You two, please follow me." King Blake stood high above watching your departing figure. When they left, he started to fly into a rage, stomping his feet on the chair, his face full of anger and resentment, shouting loudly, "What a useless person, and that Lu Feng, daring to use his son to threaten me." Suddenly Lynard entered the King Blake's office, paying his respects to his majesty. The king saw him and asked in surprise, "Lynard, what are you here for?" Lynard said excitedly, "I came to give his majesty some Han Dynasty specialties, and also some information that I know." The king's face was filled with amazement, his mouth opened wide, and he exclaimed, "Oh!" Han Dynasty's food was filled on the table. After tasting it, King Blake had to admit that Han Dynasty's food was really delicious. King Blake picked up the pâté and ate it. Listening to Lynard tell the strange stories of the Han Dynasty, he didn't believe it and asked again. Like the things he said, for example, giant objects flying in the sky, iron ships spewing black smoke, these things are hard to believe. Lynard immediately affirmed, "But your majesty, those two envoys came on iron ships spewing black smoke. If you are curious, you can go directly to the port to see." King Blake said indifferently. "I won't argue about this, Lynard. I just want to ask you, as you wish. Will we have a chance when my son returns?" Lynard replied with a desperate expression. "Your majesty, I think it's better if we don't fight the Han Dynasty." Then Lynard suddenly frowned and continued to speak, "We are really no match for Han Dynasty." King Blake heard and stopped eating, slammed his hands on the table, his face angry, helplessly said, "So what? I know, you step down." Lynard bowed his head and replied, "Yes." King Blake suppressed his anger. After Lynard left, he flew into a rage, his face full of murderous intent. He punched the table, breaking it in half. This punch caused the food on the table to be distorted and fall to the floor. He looked unconvinced and said loudly, "I don't believe you guys are really that invincible." At this time, in the Marshallese national market of the Toa Empire, merchants were bustling about offering to buy and sell. "Dear two guests, this is our Marshallese national market, you can buy anything you want here." The merchant paid the worker, "Thank you, this is the promised salary." The worker happily replied, "Oh, thank you." The two of them, Gaba and Diao, took advantage of the time to visit the Marshall National Market here together. Gaba asked urgently, "Diao, let's go see where to rent a shop." Diao replied, "No rush, let's wait a moment." Gaba asked curiously, "Who are you waiting for?" Just as he finished speaking, someone appeared in front of the two of them and spoke. "Miss Diao," Diao replied with a light smile, speaking of which, he had arrived. Gaba was confused and didn't know who it was, but also said, A long, shiny pink-haired beast girl, holding a piece of paper in her hand, walked over and said brightly, "Everyone is back, here is the report." Diao smiled and replied generously, "You've worked hard, tell everyone to sit down and rest first, I'll take care of the food and drink." At the corner of the street, the 5 young men assigned by the pink-haired beast girl had finished their mission and were standing around chatting. "How many streets have you run?" "I've run 7 streets, I'm almost exhausted." The purple-haired one said, the brown-haired one also said, "I'm even worse, 9 streets, 9. The young man standing next to him waved his hand and pointed behind him, saying, "However, Miss Diao is very generous. This time we've come back, we've made a fortune." He then laughed loudly. At this moment, Gaba and Diao walked closer to the 5 people. Gaba was surprised and thought to himself, "Hey, aren't these people the guards of the merchant caravan?" Then Gaba asked, "Diao, what's going on?" Diao took the paper that the pink-haired beast girl had just given him and read it carefully, then replied, "It's nothing. I told them to go out and investigate the people." Then, Diao held up the paper for Gaba to see, pointed at the paper, her eyes lit up and said, "Just collect 10 pieces of information related to the city and you will get 1 gold coin, only cost 300 silver coins, completed the basic investigation of the city, isn't it very profitable?" Then Diao walked up to the 5 young men and shouted, "Before you open the shop, I have a new mission for you all." The reward was as generous as before. After hearing this, the 5 men were all happy and excited, their eyes shining brightly, they raised their hands and shouted, "Good." Powerful footsteps sounded. Avery and Jones, the two of them were walking into a restaurant. Avery had a cold demeanor. As he walked, he ordered the restaurant owner to bring out a portion of their best food. The restaurant owner happily said, "Okay, please sit down." At this moment, the food was placed in front of the two people. Jones pointed at the plate of food on the table, his face darkened, and he was stunned. Avery saw the food on the table and was not surprised. He told Jones, "Don't complain, eat something, and continue with the mission." Avery was picking up his cup to drink when he heard a group of people talking to each other. "Have you heard? I heard that the market is selling Han Dynasty products." One of them suddenly asked, "Han Dynasty, what are those?" Avery put down his cup, hummed, and listened to their conversation. The red-haired man in the navy uniform sneered, "You don't know about this either, you're so out of date." The purple-haired man in the navy uniform agreed. "That's right, everyone knows that the Han Dynasty's food is the best in the world. It's a country famous for its cuisine." Then he criticized the food here, even the poor people of Han Dynasty hated it and wouldn't eat it. The man with the green hair, leaning on his hands and hips, also heard some news. "I think I also heard that Han Dynasty has something called canned food. The food inside can be kept for more than half a year. It seems that this time their trading association also brought a lot of such things here to sell." The orange-haired man wearing the navy uniform also rushed in and continued speaking. It was said that many nobles had placed orders in advance. When the time came, they would sell them outside and earn quite a bit. The purple-haired beast man heard this and asked in surprise, "Is this true or fake? I'll have to go check it out tomorrow." Hearing the conversation of these people, Jones leaned into Avery's ear and whispered, "Wow, Torola's information is really well informed. It seems like we just got here." Avery coldly replied, "No, it must be because Torola's information is well informed." She looked up at the three people in navy uniforms and said, she looked at the three of them, it was obvious that this topic was brought up on purpose. Jones understood the situation and asked again. What she meant was, someone behind their back asked them to do so. Avery put the cup of water on the table and replied, 80% of it was that girl Diao's idea. I don't know where His Majesty found such a smart person. If Diao's side has started to act, our plan must also follow suit. Avery reached out to take a cake, then continued with the plan. When they finished the transaction, that would be when our money house would come into play. We had to grab this opportunity. Jones, with a sullen face, sighed and replied, I know, but we also have to buy a store to open a money house. Furthermore, we have to find someone who is willing to sell the premises. Hearing Jones say that, Avery continued, it's not that troublesome, the princess has already shown me the way. Jones asked in surprise, what is it? Avery took a bite of the cake and replied, using the money to hit. Then suddenly Avery's face darkened, she grimaced, threw up the piece of cake she had just bitten, and angrily said, this is too hard to eat. Jones was picking up the cake to eat when she saw Avery's expression, and she sobbed, Avery, I want to go to the trade union to buy canned goods. Early the next morning, on the Toa Imperial Market, the tall buildings were also majestic, along with a 1,000-year-old tree, casting shade throughout the market. Lelisa was standing with her arms crossed, leaning against the wooden crate next to the wall, deep in thought. She recalled the time she entered Larsen Lauren's opinion, the king of the Spirit Empire. King Larsen Lauren was holding the letter of authority in his hand reading it, then asked, compensation money? Lelisa stood with her arms crossed and answered, yes, the specific reason and the amount are all written in the letter of state. If there is anything your majesty doesn't understand, I can explain. King Larsen Lauren put the letter on the table and said, no need, just do it like that. Lelisa replied, it's convenient for us like this, thank you, your majesty. King Larsen Lauren continued to speak with some hesitation, but what surprised me the most was her. After being away for so many years, this was her first time returning, and she finally gave up. Lelisa heard, her face was sad, her eyes looked down at the ground, her eyes were sparkling, she didn't say anything. Lelisa walked out of the king's study, stood with her arms crossed, leaned against the wooden barrel, then sighed and said, sure enough, I can't help but meet a few people when I return. Then Lelisa was startled and made a sound. A few people were standing around looking at the shop she was standing in front of. What's with this shop? There's such a big commotion. Then someone continued, I don't know, it seems like it's Princess Jill's carriage. Princess Jill got off the carriage and walked towards Lelisa. Princess Jill stood in front of Lelisa, put her hands on her hips, and said, Han Dynasty messenger, I have something to say. After saying that, the two of them went inside the shop and sat down. Princess Jill's face was worried, her eyes were sparkling with anticipation. She asked urgently, Lelisa, do you have news of Jenny? Lelisa held Princess Jill's hands tightly to comfort her. Jill, calm down. Princess Jill looked worried and anxious as she said, how could I not be worried, she is my sister. I can't calm down. Before Jenny left she sent me a letter, saying she wanted to risk setting off with the boat team, telling me not to worry. Then she continued with tears streaming down her face. I eavesdropped on her conversation with the emperor and knew that she represented the Han Dynasty and that the purpose of the fleet was the Han Dynasty. Lelisa patted Princess Jill's head and comforted her, don't worry Jill, I've met Jenny. Lelisa excitedly continued to tell about Jenny's situation. Now she works in Changan City, His Majesty Lu Feng appointed her as an art teacher. Many people respect her talent, no one bullies her. Princess Jill happily asked back, really, Lelisa sulkily asked back, don't you believe my words? Princess Jill waved her hand to indicate no, she quickly said, no, I didn't mean that. Lelisa teased Jill, poking her finger at Jill's forehead and saying, okay, I don't mean to blame you. Princess Jill scratched her head and smiled contentedly, then said, in short, I'm at ease as long as she's doing well. Only then did Jill have the mind to ask about Lelisa's situation. What about Lelisa? Will she still come back this time? I believe that many people here are looking forward to her return. I have always been looking forward to her return. After hearing that, Lelisa's eyes glistened with tears and she choked up as she replied, Jill, I can't stay in the Empire. Lelisa turned her back and coldly continued, as many people want me to come back, there are also as many people who want me not to come back. Princess Jill heard that and replied, but we will protect you. Lelisa placed both hands on the box and said loudly, thank you, Jill, but I have found someone worthy of following. That person is the current King Lu Feng of the Han Dynasty. I came back this time to help him, that's all. The princess looked sad and sighed, if that's the case, I can't advise you. Then Princess Jill quickly said goodbye, I'll die today and will come find you later. Lelisa turned around and said to Jill, wait. Then from inside, Lelisa pulled out a small purple square box, held it in her hand, and continued, you've come, do me a favor and then go. Outside the shop, soldiers were standing in front of the door, preventing the civilians from entering. The civilians were standing around the shop, whispering and gossiping. Tell me, what exactly is Princess Jill here for? The person beside her replied, I don't know. I don't know what's so special about this shop that attracts the royal family. Suddenly there was the sound of the door opening, people whispered to each other, out, out. Lelisa opened the door to let Princess Jill out. At this time, Princess Jill was still immersed in the joy of being given the purple box by Lelisa. Princess Jill smiled and said, finally bought it. Lelisa happily replied, if you are satisfied, welcome to come back next time. Princess Jill happily turned back and said, we the royal family all know that the Han Dynasty's products are all excellent. If you come to the Larson Empire to sell things again in the future, you must inform me. Lelisa bowed her head and respectfully replied, yes. Having said that, Lelisa got on the carriage and returned to the palace. The people gathered around to watch. Lelisa said goodbye to Jill, and the princess walked away leisurely. The purple-clothed elf girl turned to talk to the person standing next to her, hey, did you hear that? The pink-clothed elf girl replied, Han Dynasty's merchandise, can alert the princess to personally come here to buy it. Then the purple-clothed elf girl hurriedly ran to Lelisa and asked, Miss, what exactly do you sell? The blue-clothed elf girl also spoke up, yes, what are the prices? Lelisa held a purple box in her hand, exactly like the one she gave to Princess Jill. She raised her hand to introduce it. Today, they mainly sold makeup. This was a product that could only be found in Han Dynasty. It was a type of item that made people more beautiful. The elf girl's eyes lit up, their mouths wide open in surprise. The pink-clothed girl asked again, becoming beautiful, really? The purple-clothed elf excitedly replied, never mind, I must definitely buy the things that the royal family likes. Lelisa stood at the door, looking towards Princess Jill's carriage. Princess Jill also lifted the curtain, looked at Lelisa, and thought to herself, this is unbelievable, Lelisa. Princess Jill thought back to Lelisa's dark past, she thought to herself, the past her. And the current image of Lelisa, smiling and talking happily, Princess Jill thought to herself, now she can smile like this, is it Lu Feng who changed her? Suddenly Princess Jill was a little worried, but a man that Lelisa thought was worthy of loyalty created things for women. Princess Jill continued to think, who exactly is this Lu Feng? Lelisa won't be fooled right. At this time, in Changan City, a towering skyscraper has been completed. His Majesty Lu Feng put his hand on the elevator switch and said, then. Lu Feng turned to look at our beautiful girls, Mina, Ellie and Nicole, and continued, I'll start. Ellie stood beside him, raising her hands to cheer, and started to walk towards the young master. On the contrary, Nicole said with a worried expression, young master, is it really not dangerous? Having said that, Lu Feng decisively pulled the switch, and the mechanical systems inside began to move. Mina saw that and shouted, it's working. Ellie also happily said, it's really moving. The four people standing in the elevator, Mina, Ellie, and Nicole, cheered endlessly. His Majesty Lu Feng said, it seems that the black oil plant energy source found earlier was not bad, so the elevator can operate normally. Ellie asked His Majesty Lu Feng in confusion, young master, if you use black oil as the energy to move, why is it called an elevator? Lu Feng was also embarrassed, and made an O sound, not knowing how to explain this. Then Lu Feng continued with a confused face, because he planned to use electricity to control this thing in the future. Ellie was surprised and exclaimed, Lu Feng thought to himself, I can't say that I'm used to calling this thing an elevator. Suddenly the elevator stopped, everyone stepped out of the elevator, entered the room, Mina rushed straight to the desk, put her hands on the table. Exclaiming, "Oh, so this is what the top floor is like." Ellie ran to the glass door, she exclaimed, "Wow. Standing here, one can see the whole city." Ellie's eyes lit up, her mouth wide open, she said, "This place can see very far, the whole Changan city can be seen." Ellie, her eyes sparkling, turned to look at Lu Feng and said, "Young master, if we could come here to work in the future, that would be great." That way, looking at the city would give a sense of accomplishment, Lu Feng replied gently, he had such plans. He lifted his hand and continued, "There will be more and more important people near the imperial area. If you randomly distribute people in and out, it will be too risky for safety. So we plan to move most of the basic things to the top floor here, and the imperial area will be responsible for making decisions in the future." Ellie heard this and laughed happily and replied, Nicole seemed to be afraid of heights. Seeing this, Mina teased her, pulling her to the glass door to watch together. Ellie continued her thoughts with Lu Feng. She also discovered a good place. This tallest building is near the center of Changan City. If everyone gathers here, it will be more convenient for everyone to work. Lu Feng agreed, yes. His Majesty Lu Feng looked into the distance, deep in thought. However, from the looks of it, although Changan City's area was very large, most of them were two-story buildings. It was time to build high-rise buildings so that Changan City could enter the next phase. Suddenly, Mina exclaimed, "Oh." Mina looked closely at you on the ground, then continued, "Is that Shirley?" Ellie also agreed, "That's right, still holding documents, panicking like that. Is she looking for us?" A moment later, Shirley was in the room on the top floor. She rushed in to report. "Your Majesty, young lady Ellie." "Young lady Nicole," Ellie asked in surprise, "What's wrong, Shirley, so anxious?" Shirley hurriedly handed the document to Ellie to read and said, yes, there is a very urgent document that needs to be delivered to Miss Ellie." Ellie read the document, her face was panicked. "What, someone actually did this?" Lu Feng was also curious and asked, "What happened?" Ellie's face was full of worry. She turned back and said to Lu Feng, "Your Majesty, over at the market, there is a restaurant that sells spoiled meat, causing many people to have stomach aches." Lu Feng looked disappointed, thinking to himself, this kind of thing really still happens? Ellie continued anxiously, "Your Majesty, we must severely punish you, this kind of thing cannot happen again." Lu Feng calmly replied, "That's not enough, let's build a food hygiene department." Ellie was confused and asked again, "Food hygiene department?" Lu Feng explained calmly, "That's right, from now on, in Changan City, all food stores must register with this department. The people from this department, after examining the relevant documents, will provide the corresponding certificates, allowing the business to be conducted. At the same time, the press should publicize that those stores that are not qualified and do not comply with Changan City sanitation management are not recommended to buy. In the future, the sanitation department should conduct irregular inspections and, if violations are found, their business qualifications will be revoked." Nicole heard, covered her face, and applauded the idea, "So that's it. Like this, it can really make many people give up the idea of choosing inferior goods instead of good ones." Ellie looked at Lu Feng with admiration and said, "Your Majesty, how can you always think of a way in time? It's like you've been prepared for it all along, so amazing." Lu Feng patted Ellie's head and replied, "It's just the wisdom of a predecessor." Shirley still seemed a little hesitant about this idea. She said, "But Your Majesty, if the people from the cleaning department and the store reach a deal and cover for each other, then what should we do?" Lu Feng, Mina, and Ellie were stunned, turning to look at Shirley who was frozen for 5 seconds. No one expected this. Shirley felt something was wrong. She quickly defended herself, I just said it casually." Lu Feng waved his hand and said, "Don't be nervous, your worries are very normal. It also shows that your thinking has surpassed many people. I'm very happy that you have made such progress." Shirley bowed her head and replied, thank you, Your Majesty." Then they sat down at the table and continued talking. Lu Feng said, "Actually this matter is easy to solve, let's form an investigation team." Mina sighed and whispered to Nicole after hearing that, "Really, I said I would rest for a day, but I'm busy again." Nicole forced a smile and replied, "He's the young master after all, you can't leave him." Then Nicole spoke, "So I'll go make some food and drinks to relieve boredom." Mina quickly raised her hand in agreement, "Okay, I want dried fish." Ellie asked Lu Feng in confusion, "The investigation team? What department is this?" Lu Feng pointed at the table and explained, it was the department that had the authority to conduct an investigation, and it was also specifically used to monitor the departments, to see if there were any corrupt officials. Ellie sat and listened attentively. Then Ellie raised her finger and said, "That is to say, hang a lock for power." Shirley stroked her chin and thought. Lu Feng replied, "That's right." Nicole brought over drinks. Lu Feng continued, "Power is a powerful tool, but it cannot be abused. Otherwise, everything will be out of order, so we must supervise and manage, absolutely cannot let go." Shirley smiled, seeming to understand. "I see, as long as we have an investigation department, we will be able to cut off the sanitation department's cover-up." Lu Feng replied, "That's not right. Shirley, hearing that, Shirley's eyes looked sad as she asked back. Ah, like that's not okay either. Lu Feng picked up his teacup and continued to explain. For example, what if the people from the inspection department also deal with other departments? Shirley, yes. Give the inspection department an extra lock. Lu Feng said helplessly, the more the inspection structure, the more complicated it will be for our generation to develop. Moreover, it will give birth to a lot of corruption from within. The existence of the organization itself will lead to corruption. This is inevitable. Ellie asked Lu Feng. So your majesty, don't we have a perfect solution? Lu Feng smiled faintly and replied, no, this is a spiral with no solution. Ellie sighed sadly and said. Ah, then. Lu Feng stood up and walked towards the glass door, talking as he walked. But, we can start from education to convey the correct good worldview to children, so that they form a good tendency towards the future, so that the seed of living thought develops a good world, becoming their mission and ideal. Lu Feng stood by the glass door, looking into the distance, bright as the future of Changan City, and continued, even though in the future, there will be people who fall into the mud of corruption, but as long as there is one person who still has an ideal in their heart, everyone will have a chance to start over. On the streets of the Toa Empire. The road had just been rained on, so it was quite slippery and full of puddles. A black cat-shaped shadow appeared on the street. This black shadow looked up at a room somewhere in Toa City. The whole body was black, but the eyes were still bright like car headlights because bright eyes are a characteristic of cats. At this moment, the dark shadow crept through every corner, used his hand to pry open a window and sneaked into a room. Clack, the shadow's footsteps hit the floor of the room. Cat, cat, cat. Diao stood proudly on the bed. She laughed gleefully as she looked at the person who had just attacked her lying face down on the floor. Ha ha ha, you're finally here. Sister Gaba, please come and deal with this incompetent little thief. Gaba held the fire in her hand and walked to Diao's room, grinning. Diao, leave it to me. Holding the fire in her hand, Gaba shone it into the thief's face. Oh my god, Gaba exclaimed. She was surprised to see that the person lying on the floor, his face beaten around, was Jones. She said to Dio in surprise. Hey, isn't this Jones? Why is she in Torola? Diao stood on the bed, not understanding what was going on. She asked Gaba in surprise. Oh, does Gaba know this person? At this moment, Avery ran in from somewhere, panting as he entered the room. Gaba, you all misunderstood. Seeing Avery standing against the door, Gaba was also stunned. Oh Avery, then she quickly introduced herself to Diao. Diao, this is Avery from Changan City, the one who was in a daze on the ground is Jones. You all are our friends. Diao was embarrassed, standing rooted to the bed, smiling shyly and said. This is. Ah, so embarrassing. Jones was now put to bed by everyone, a cold towel was placed on her forehead, Jones' eyes were still rolling around, looking at her like this. Diao's move must have been quite strong. Everyone sat on the living room sofa. Gaba asked Avery with a doubtful heart. Avery, why did you all come to Torola? Avery sat at the side and replied. This is His Majesty Lu Feng's mission. Diao listened and asked doubtfully. Oh, then why did you contact us at this time? Avery's face suddenly became more serious. She turned to Diao and said, this. Well, actually, I have something I want to ask Diao to help me with. What's wrong, Avery? Diao asked back. Avery also sat down and spoke slowly. His Majesty Lu Feng arranged for Jones and I to come here to build the money house. It has now been completed smoothly. However, there are no guests, which is completely unsatisfactory to His Majesty. Therefore, we would like you to try to see if you have a way to solve this problem? Diao thought deeply. Money house? Let me see. Ah, I know. Avery, leave it to me. Tomorrow I guarantee you'll make Avery and Jones's money bank more numerous than ants. Scene change, early the next morning at Torola Market. Diao was holding a loudspeaker and shouting loudly in the market. Everyone, thank you all for coming to support us this time. This time, the Han Dynasty goods we brought here are almost sold out. We will be leaving for Han Dynasty soon. Everyone below was in an uproar. Oh my god, so fast? I haven't even had time to buy anything yet. Diao was majestic in her green cloak. She continued speaking loudly. Dear ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't bought what you want yet, hurry up and buy it. Today, our market will have a big sale. Don't worry, you won't lose money. Ah, there's a deal. Merchants, small traders, and Torola people all competed with each other. Listen, the Han Dynasty people are coming back. They're finally back. I can't wait. I want to follow them back to the Han Dynasty to make a fortune. Some of you are also making a fuss. Hurry up and arrange for you to go to the port to prepare the boat and money. Don't wait until then to be caught off guard. In the bustling atmosphere, a merchant pointed at Gaba and Diao. He said to his companions, "Look, everyone, look where that girl wants to go." One of the group also hurriedly said, Go, follow quickly. Who knows, she might want to buy something to bring back to Han Dynasty. We absolutely cannot let this opportunity to get rich pass us by. Yes, you are right. Another person agreed. And so this group of people quickly followed Diao. Diao and Gaba seemed to know that the merchants were following them. This was Diao's plan. Gaba covered his mouth with his hand and whispered to Diao. Diao, those people are really following Axia. Diao replied happily. Of course, in their eyes now, I am a golden stick that makes money. Wherever I go, those people will follow me. After a while, Diao arrived at the money shop. She exclaimed. There it is. The money shop that Sister Avery had told her about. There it is. She jumped up happily and continued talking to Gaba. Ah, there's a bank here. The group of people had been following Diao and Gaba's backs. Hearing Diao shout out the name of the money shop, they all wondered. Someone said, Money shop? What is a money shop? Have you all seen this shop before? A man replied. That thing, I think I heard you say before when you came back from Han Dynasty, that it's a place where you can deposit money in exchange for a certificate, later use that certificate to go to another bank to withdraw money if you want. One woman exclaimed in surprise. Wow. Isn't that too convenient? Another put her hand to her chin and pondered. Let's see. Here, surely this isn't a scam. All the while inside the bank, Jones and Avery asked Diao suspiciously. Diao, will they come in? Diao answered Jones very confidently. Don't worry, Ms. Jones, the bank's design is for the convenience of the people and to avoid danger. Many of the merchants outside will follow Diao to Han Dynasty. They are very clear, bringing a large amount of money with them. Once they encounter an accident at sea, they will go bankrupt. If there is a way to avoid this danger, they will naturally come to the door. I understand them too well, Sister Jones. Diao happily continued speaking. Simply put, the money house only needs me as bait to lure them here. So that's how it is. Avery was full of admiration and praise for Diao. No wonder no one came before, it turns out no one advertised it. The group of people following Diao had already reached the entrance of the bank, everyone was eagerly racing to each other. Why don't you go in and take a look? That's right, let's go in. Go in and take a look. Inside the lobby of the bank, in front of the group of merchants, the bank staff was processing Diao's matter. Diao said to the bank staff. I've filled it out. The staff politely replied. Yes sir, may we count the money? Diao boldly replied. Of course we can. Then Diao's subordinates spoke loudly. Make way, please don't block. The merchants quickly made way and replied. Ah yes. Then, these people were overwhelmed by the money that Diao's subordinates were bringing in for her. Everyone was amazed and opened their mouths. Oh my god, this is so much money? Diao confidently placed the box of money on the table and said to the staff. 23 million Torola coins. Everyone, please count it. The staff happily replied. Yes, please wait a moment. The people standing behind witnessing this scene were in an uproar. Look, it really sent. A purple-haired employee with a professional demeanor happily said to the group of merchants standing behind Diao. Everyone, please be understanding and wait. Because this customer has a large amount of deposits, we need you to check it, so it will take a while. The group of merchants below also kindly and happily replied. Ah yes, okay. A few merchants went up to the customer service and asked the staff here. I want to ask, can money really be deposited here and taken elsewhere? The staff replied with a smile and clarity. Of course, sir. Our money transfer shops are located all over the country. As long as you bring your ID, you can withdraw money anywhere. Furthermore, we will also send you a percentage interest according to your regular deposits. Your money is still there, and you will get more interest if you send it to us. You guys are shouting, there is also interest? Is it that good? After a while, Diao's 2,300 Torola coins were counted by the staff. A staff member respectfully handed Diao a certificate and said, Sir, we have finished counting. This is the certificate for you to withdraw the money. Diao happily thanked him. Thank you, everyone, for your hard work. The group of people following Diao were now having a good time with each other. See, Miss Diao really deposited money here. Another person replied. She's not worried at all, and perhaps we don't need to worry either. At this moment, the purple-haired employee warmly greeted the customers waiting below. Dear customers, who would like to deposit money next to receive interest like Miss Diao? Despite the enthusiastic invitation, everyone below still looked at each other hesitantly. Everyone seemed to not quite believe it, their faces still showing a bit of worry about depositing money into the money shop. But then, just 2 seconds later, everyone raised their hands and volunteered and said loudly, Me first. Everyone was happy. Miss Diao dared to send it, and said there was no problem, so we also wanted to send it. Quickly let me send the money. Jones and Avery stood at the corner of the bank and witnessed the scene. Jones was full of excitement. Success, Avery. Avery also smiled and happily replied. This Diao girl, as expected of the one His Majesty Lu Feng chose. Not bad. Now we can go back and talk to His Majesty Lu Feng with peace of mind. Hee hee, how fun. At the same time, in the imperial city, Changan City. The sunlight was still shining brightly on the top of this castle. In the office, Lu Feng held the document that Ellie had just reported. He nodded and said, not bad. Ellie didn't know what His Majesty was happy about. She couldn't help but ask curiously. Your Majesty Lu Feng, did you receive any good news? Lu Feng lifted up the stack of documents and handed them to Ellie. It's good news from Torola. Lu Feng's face couldn't hide his joy as he continued. The money house over there has already opened smoothly. Moreover, business is booming. In this letter, Avery also told me that this success was thanks to Miss Shirley's younger sister Dio. When she comes back, I will definitely reward her. Shirley stood listening, feeling extremely proud of her little sister Dio. She blushed and smiled as she thanked Lu Feng. Thank you very much, Your Highness. Lu Feng continued reading the news that Avery sent back. His face was still radiant. As he continued reading the letter, he thought to himself with joy. But what was even more surprising was the Larsen Empire. It turned out to be a letter from Lelisa. In the letter, Lelisa summarized it as follows. Your Majesty, I am Lelisa, the money house has been successfully established in the Larsen Empire. I believe you found out through Princess Jenny. I used to be a member of the Larsen Empire. I don't intend to hide this from His Majesty Lu Feng. This time, the bank can open smoothly. I have also asked a few old friends. In the future, they can also help your bank stand firm in the Larsen Empire without arousing suspicion. Your Majesty, please rest assured, they are harmless to your plans, so don't worry. Reading these lines of the letter, Lu Feng couldn't help but be surprised. Lelisa is really mysterious. Ellie saw that Lu Feng had been reading Lelisa's letter for a while now without any reaction or words, so she anxiously asked. Your Majesty Lu Feng, how is Lelisa? Lu Feng shook his head and replied to Ellie. It's okay, it's nothing, you don't need to worry about it. Your Majesty Lu Feng didn't tell Ellie because he thought that it was best to let Lelisa tell everything herself. Folding the pages of Lelisa and Avery's letters, Lu Feng put his hands on the table and spoke to Ellie and Shirley in a natural and relaxed manner. Alright, if the money houses on both Torola and Larsen are officially open for business, the fleet will also have to return soon. Then we should also proceed with the next step of the plan. Then, he looked at Miss Shirley and gave an order. First, Miss Shirley, you inform the telegraph to send a message to all the people in charge of the money houses in these two places. Tell them that after the caravan sets off, secretly transfer the copper coins of the countries that the caravan brought back here, and only keep enough for circulation and consumption. Shirley listened attentively and wrote down every word of Lu Feng's instructions on paper. After listening, Ellie had some questions, so she asked again. Young master, are we going to bring that money back here now? Lu Feng pointed and affirmed. Of course, Ellie, money cannot be brought back, from the beginning to the end it is just a number. It also cannot achieve the effect of controlling their country. Lu Feng continued to speak clearly. Moreover, we can't just leave the money there, we have to use this money to earn more, right? Then, Lu Feng gave Ellie some documents and instructed Ellie. Ellie, after bringing the money back, you arrange Changan City's money bank, make it into a general money bank, and carry out the transportation and mobilization of the money according to this agreement. Yes, young master, Ellie took the documents and happily replied. Returning to Shirley, Lu Feng continued to instruct her. Shirley, secondly, you should tell the trade association to purchase a large amount of raw materials. We don't need processed products from other countries, but bring all the raw materials that have never been seen before or are cheap here. Next, thirdly, inform all the factories to prepare. During the next period, everyone will often have to work overtime and produce at full capacity. Very soon, the caravan will bring back a large number of foreign merchants. This is an opportunity to make a lot of money with your eyes closed. We must seize this opportunity. Ellie was amazed and praised Lu Feng for his great ideas. I have seen the gold coins continuously flowing into our country. Then, Ellie approached Lu Feng, happily standing in front of His Majesty and continued speaking. Now looking over, compare with this young master. The Black Iris and Fabro team were so stupid, they clearly had a chance to make a lot of money but they let it go. Lu Feng also smiled lightly and replied. Haha, the purpose determines the means. Lu Feng looked at the document in his hand and continued speaking softly. Actually, if he didn't do this, they would have started trading sooner or later. This was the inevitable course of history. At this point, Lu Feng carefully considered. However, when he stimulated them, the merchants who benefited from this trade would also discover the benefits that a new continent would bring. No longer the small business of the past, more profits, more income, eyes will have to expand more and more to the ocean. The more Lu Feng thought about the future, the more comfortable he felt as he dreamed of a bright future. By then, the maritime era that belonged to this country would also come. It was truly worth looking forward to. After painting a beautiful and prosperous picture of the future, Lu Feng turned to Ellie and continued talking. Speaking of which, the situation of opening a money shop in Fabro was unknown. Ellie raised her hand to calculate, and replied. Leia and Mira have been gone for a while now. There should be news soon, Your Majesty. Scene change, now the spaceship is flying in the sky. The spaceship flies through the white clouds. Sister Leia, Mira reports to Leia. Our spaceship is approaching the imperial capital of Fabro. Leia is in a hurry. Quickly inform the people below to prepare for departure. Yes, sister. So they arrived at the royal capital of Fabro. His Majesty Lu Feng's subordinates looked down. Before them was the royal capital of the Fabro Empire. It looked quite grand and majestic. Everyone quickly landed at the royal capital Fabro. Leia said to everyone. Everyone follow me. Don't leave anyone behind. Leia gave a stern order to the group of civil servants. Especially you civil servants. When things go wrong, don't panic. We will protect you. Please trust us. The group of civil servants said in unison. Yes, ma'am. Mira held the map in her hand. She happily informed Leia. Sis, the location is confirmed. Leia replied. Yes, Mira. In the deserted streets of the royal capital Fabro late at night, Leia's group was carefully following and closely monitoring the guards patrolling. These soldiers, who are supposed to be the capital's guards, are complaining to each other while holding torches. How long until the shift change? I'm so sleepy. After a while, Mira whispered to everyone. Everyone, we're here. Leia stood in front of the door and knocked. A voice came from inside. You are Zhuge. Before the person inside could finish speaking, Leia continued. I am your grandfather. So the previous sentence was a code, a secret code just for you, Leia. A voice spoke from inside the room. I calculated the date and knew everyone was about to arrive, so come in quickly. Entering the room, a man with curly blonde hair and two horns on his head, covered in black, took off his hood when Leia's group entered. He raised his hand to his chest and greeted respectfully. I am number 9527, I have been waiting for you. Leia replied. You have worked hard. She asked again. Is this the shop you bought? It's quite big. The subordinate with the number 9527 replied. Yes, the location is suitable. Besides, the owner is in a hurry to sell. Don't worry, it's Fabro's regular procedure, no one will suspect this. Leia praised. Very good. Then, the blonde young man gave Leia a bunch of keys and some documents. He said to Leia. I'll leave these keys and documents to you, sir. I have to go back first. If I return any later, the Fabro merchant will be suspicious. Leia took the documents and keys. She quickly replied. Okay, you can go back now. Leia sat in the middle of the shop, holding up the key and said to everyone. Everyone, find your own room and rest. We will continue tomorrow. But remember not to act rashly. Everyone bowed their heads and replied. Yes. Everyone left. Leia let you go and let out a tired sigh. Don't ask me for help again. I won't take this mission again. The journey is so long, I'm exhausted. Oh my wings are so tired. Mira suddenly asked Leia. Sis, did you forget something when you said that just now? Leia looked dumbfounded and asked again. Huh, what? This little girl. Leia remembered what she promised His Majesty Lu Feng. Such an important mission, of course it must be given to me. I don't feel comfortable giving it to someone else. Hey, Leia scolded Mira. But Mira still did not let go, she teased her sister back. I remember, you promised yourself at first. Leia was so embarrassed that she got angry. She yelled at Mira. So annoying. Can't I scold you a little? Leia continued, giving reasons to defend herself. I was just saying it casually. Besides, I also wanted to help Lu Feng. Helping him is also within our duty. Mira saw that Leia was about to give her a blunt argument. She quickly replied to ease Leia's embarrassment. Yes. But Mira thought to herself. Hello? Since when did this become a matter of duty? This is so surreal. In the Yadian kingdom, Timothy's territory, morning began, the sunlight shone down on the entire territory, covering it in a shiny golden color. In the meeting room, Timothy rested his chin on his hand and said thoughtfully, the whole Yadian was about to fall into chaos. Count Willer, after grasping the current situation, said, that old man Yad was a fool, to have actively led the enemy in. Now it was good, he himself was completely swallowed up. After looking at the strategic map, Count Willer continued to laugh and said, the Pope is now like a pot of loose sand, it will be very easy to deal with. Count Robin saw Count Willer so pleased. He said, Lord Willer, it is too early to say this now. Count Robin then picked up the lollipop, stared at it and said, the Pope is gone, but the enemy we face now is not as easy to deal with as the Pope. Timothy asked Robin, have you found out the background of those guys? Count Robin put the candy in his mouth and sucked it, then nodded and said, of course, Your Majesty. A soldier bowed his head and announced to Timothy and his group, Your Majesty, Mr. Axe has arrived. Axe entered and politely replied, Greetings, Your Majesty. After Axe was seated, Timothy began the meeting. Timothy said, if everyone is here, Robin, quickly tell the two gentlemen our current intelligence. Robin nodded and replied, yes. Robin opened the document and began to report on the current situation. Robin said, those people came from the Fabro country, led by the third princess of Fabro, Field. They were also the ones who held the Black Iris, leading the huge slave trade in the underground world. Count Robin continued, now she has taken over many of Yadian's major cities, including the royal capital. She has the underworld network that she developed before, allowing her to take over most of the cities without any trouble. In Count Robin's mind, Field is an extremely evil woman. Count Robin continued, many of our nobles helped her in the process. Count Willer heard this, his face was serious, angry beyond words, those people. Count Robin stood up, angrily slammed his hand on the table, and analyzed the situation. In short, if we don't think of a way, her power will only grow stronger. When she swallows all of the territories of the Patriarch, we will most likely be her next target. Timothy also stood up and asked Robin, if we confront her, what are the chances of winning? Robin's face was tense, telling the truth, for now, I don't see any chance of winning. Timothy's face was solemn, not knowing what to say. Count Willer still didn't believe it, this wasn't right. Count Willer lowered his head, thinking that what Robin said was a bit too much. There were quite a few of us. Previously, when dealing with your Archbishop, we were not at a disadvantage. Count Robin saw that Count Willer had misunderstood the enemy's strength, so he explained the reason why he said that. The main reason was the 20,000 soldiers she brought with her. Count Robin moved a flag, then analyzed, the Fabro Empire soldiers were a tradition of generations, they were trained in martial arts from birth. Furthermore, they had experienced countless battlefields, it could be said that they were a team with a lot of experience. After that, the other flags were also moved by Count Robin, and at the same time, he also analyzed. In front of our army, although the number looked extremely large, in reality, most of them were farmers who could not survive anymore. What could truly be considered strong was only 23,000 people. To turn them into useful soldiers on the battlefield, we needed time to train them. No need to say anything in front of guests, now that we engage in a head-on battle, Field's 20,000 soldiers can directly annihilate us, Count Robin continued. Count Willer frowned now and muttered, the difference is tenfold. Axe raised his hand and said, if we confront each other head-on, we won't be able to fight back. Axe paused for a moment, then we'll fight her guerrilla. The three people, Willer, Robin and Timothy were all surprised. Count Willer was confused, what was guerrilla warfare? Timothy was also confused, Robin had never heard of this word before, asked about guerrilla warfare. Seeing everyone's surprise, Axe explained. Simply put, it was 4 sentences, 16 words. When the enemy advances, we retreat. When the enemy is calm, we harass. When the enemy is tired, we attack. When the enemy retreats, we chase. Axe waved a flag and turned to Robin. Robin had just said that Field's main goal was to swallow the remaining territory of the Patriarch. Robin nodded and said, that's right, she definitely wouldn't want a territory filled with rivals. Axe said, then we capture that point of hers, through guerrilla warfare constantly harassing her. Having said that, Axe held the yellow flag in his hand, placing it down among the green flags on the map. Then Axe continued, slowing down Field's progress, buying us time and strategic space. If all went well, frequent small battles would increase the conflict between field and the people. No one liked to be in a constant state of war. Timothy and Willer still didn't understand. Both of them were silent, not knowing what to say. Axe continued, by then, the longer the fight, the more beneficial it would be for us. Axe said with certainty, of course, just relying on these things, we can't beat field. But the enemy is in the open and we are in the dark. We can use special tactics to give her a heavy blow. Then Axe made a bold suggestion, such as beheading. Robin said, as far as I know, Field's left and right-hand man is now Deacon Hong Hei-Yenwei, who is stationed in Zene City, and most of the guards there have just left with Field. Axe's intention is that if he really wants to attack Field, he must take this opportunity to cause trouble. Axe smiled happily, snapped his fingers and said, exactly. Count Willer stroked his chin in his mind, thinking, can the battle still be fought like this? I've never heard of this tactic before. If it really is like this, I don't know if you below can do it. But, Your Majesty's plan. Thinking so, Count Willer turned to look at Timothy. Timothy asked Axe's opinion, Mr. Axe, what strategy do you think of? Axe shook his head, no. Then Axe smiled shyly, raised his hand to scratch his head, and explained, actually before leaving, His Majesty Lu Feng showed me the way. Timothy's face darkened, and he pondered, His Majesty Lu Feng. Count Willer picked up his teacup, took a sip, and thought. That's right, as a king, he should consider it more. Moreover, it was a suggestion made by his country's monarch. Before Willer could think further, Timothy made his decision immediately. Okay, let's do it. Hearing this, Count Willer spat out the tea he had just drunk a second ago. His eyes widened as he looked at Timothy in disbelief. Replacing Willer's attitude, Timothy looked at him with anger in his eyes. Count Willer, do you have any doubts? Count Willer quickly waved his hand and shook his head, smiling and saying, no, I just feel that today has opened my eyes. Then he extended his hand and continued, this strategy, although a bit unreasonable, also clearly shows that you have a unique perspective I cannot compare. Timothy heard this and laughed happily. She felt very confident in her decision and said, well, I think so too, but Count Willer could only lower his head, too embarrassed to look. Willer walked over to Robin's side and whispered in her ear, Robin, what's wrong, Your Majesty? Robin replied helplessly, this is a long story, it goes like this and like that, after listening to Robin's story. Mr. Willer's eyes lit up as he said, if that's the case, perhaps we can ask for help from the Han Dynasty in the future. Timothy and Robin were surprised, but their faces were panicked and they shouted, no, seeing those two overreacting like that. Mr. Willer was extremely scared, not knowing what was happening. He was right, why were they so fierce towards him? Only then did Robin regain his composure, coughed a few times to avoid embarrassment, and said, Lord Willer, it's better for us not to think about this for now. There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Who knows if Lu Feng will put forward harsh conditions for rescue in the future? Robin couldn't help but think, unexpectedly, His Majesty also objected, could it be that he's also thinking about this? Timothy suddenly stood up, crossed his arms and laughed loudly, that's right, I can't let Lu Feng look down on me, otherwise, how can I open my mouth to marry him in the future? Hearing these words, Axe and Count Willer widened their eyes, looking at Timothy in disbelief. Count Willer even shouted, marriage alliance. Robin covered her face with her hands, how could she think like that? She should have known this already. In the capital of Yadian, Zene City, in the woods below, there was a group of soldiers running. A soldier opened the hatch, you stood above and said, give the order, pay attention to hiding, act at night. Everyone else shouted, yes. Underground in Zene City, an army holding torches entered the tunnel, led by Timothy and Count Willer. A soldier walked up to Timothy and reported, Your Majesty, everything is ready. Timothy nodded and replied, go. At night, in Zene City, everyone is sleeping. Suddenly, a loud bang rang out, the explosion emitted a blinding light, covering the entire city. Deacon Hong was working, heard the explosion, looked out the door suspiciously. From the door, a soldier ran in, his face filled with panic as he said, Sir Deacon, no, something's wrong. Deacon Hong stood up and asked in panic, what's going on? The soldiers stuttered in response, enemy attacking Zene City. The Red Guard was angry and questioned in disbelief, the enemy, how could that be, what kind of soldiers do this? Before he could finish his sentence, an explosion occurred, the floor collapsed, smoke and fire filled the air, and dust flew everywhere. Pieces of rock and soil fell all over the ground. From behind the dust, Timothy led the army out. The soldiers quickly took control of the situation and suppressed those present at the scene. The two soldiers quickly found Deacon Hong, tied her hands, forced her to kneel, brought her in front of Timothy, reported, found the target. Kneeling on the ground, Deacon Hong raised her head and said angrily, she is Timothy. Timothy said in surprise, oh, you know me. The deacon asked suspiciously, how could she break in? Timothy's face was cold and he confidently said, this is my country, moreover it is the royal capital I have lived in since I was young, of course I know what secrets are here. After answering Deacon Hong's questions and seeing that there was nothing else to do, she gave the order. All right, take him away. The two soldiers obeyed and escorted the tied Deacon Hong out. Just then, Count Willer walked in through the door. The two men, Deacon Hong and Count Willer, passed each other, looked at each other, and coldly snorted in anger. Count Willer walked up to Timothy, bowed and said, Your Majesty, our plan was very successful. Now that Zene City is ours, they are completely unable to react. Timothy nodded and replied, It was hard work. Then she gave the order, Inform the people below, gather supplies, we must leave before Field arrives. Count Willer was worried. Your Majesty, it was so difficult to take the royal capital into your hands. Is it really just going to be like this? What a pity. Timothy stood up to analyze. Lord Willer, don't forget our plan now. We are not suitable to confront Field head-on. Then, Timothy turned around and continued, I also can't bear it, but one day, we will return here openly. Count Willer heard this and understood, bowed and obeyed. Understood, Your Majesty. A wine glass was smashed to the ground, the glass shattered into hundreds of pieces, blood-red wine splashed all over the floor. A scream rang out. What? Field leaned on the table, sat up, and asked angrily, Zene City has fallen, so where is Deacon Hong? The subordinate opposite replied, Deacon Hong was taken away by them. Field asked even more angrily, who did it? The subordinate tremblingly replied, it was Timothy. Field's eyebrows furrowed, full of doubt, Timothy. Then an arrogant voice came out, originally didn't want to fight her right now, it seemed like there were some people who needed to be taught a lesson. Field then crossed his arms and signaled to the soldiers, where are you? Gather. After a while, everyone had gathered and stood in front of Field. Suddenly, someone pushed the door open from outside and entered to announce, Your Highness, it's new news. After bowing, you just entered and said, the criminals who attacked Zene City did not stay in Zene City, on the contrary, they left very quickly, without any trace. Field scratched his chin and thought, his mouth muttered, left. Another person gave a reason, Your Highness, she wants us, let us split ourselves. Hearing this, Field laughed sinisterly, his face full of mockery, saying, what a childish tactic, unable to get on the table at all, and also causing trouble for others. In his mind, Field thought, however, if you want to play this game with me, I will play you to death. Field then gave an order, informing all the lines, to immediately know Timothy's location. The subordinate quickly shouted, Your Highness. Afterwards, he anxiously reported to Field about the current situation of his army. We must now eliminate the remnants of the cult leader. In addition, our military resources are insufficient, and we really cannot devote our energy to the army to deal with Timothy. Besides, Timothy clearly wants to delay us. If we really go find her, who knows how much time and energy it will take? It will take more than Your Highness. Field closed his eyes and smiled in response. Who said I wanted to use the army to deal with Timothy? The subordinate widened his eyes, his face confused and not understanding, Another subordinate stepped forward to analyze, Sir Knight, you don't understand Black Iris, and you don't know what Black Iris is based on. Finding someone is easy, and for us Black Iris, it won't take much time. The knight was still confused, but... Seeing this, Field held out his hand, signaling everyone to stop, saying, okay, I have my own plans for this. Then Field opposed you, coldly said, some of you must learn a lesson, otherwise, let them bother us, we will also have a headache. Field turned to the two people standing beside him, ordered Grey Deacon, Deacon White, the task of teaching that little queen is left to you. The two of them received the order in unison, replying, yes, Your Highness. At Timothy's camp. Around the tents were smoky, fragrant scents that awakened the hungry worm in everyone. Sitting in front of a fire, a knight ordered, okay, clean up, let's go. The three bowed their heads and answered in unison, okay. Then the three of them went out, talking as they walked. One of them asked, those soldiers, are they Her Majesty the Queen's troops? The one beside them replied, yes, great, we finally waited for the Queen to arrive. The other person suddenly said, you guys go ahead, I still have something to do. The two of them agreed, okay, then go ahead. The two of them looked at the girl and said, that woman, wasn't she married to a noble before? What kind of divine weapon is that? The other person, with an annoyed expression, replied, that's right, aren't you serving someone else like us now? The girl went to a secluded place and gave a signal, and a bird flew down. A bird landed on the girl's arm, and the bird stared at the tattoo on her arm. The girl quickly took out a piece of paper and said, good bird, give this to the Lord, so that the Lord knows that I have found Timothy's location. Like this, I will be able to marry into a rich family. The girl then snorted coldly, then stuffed the paper into the bird's leg. The tattoo on her arm had the same shape as that bird. The bird flew into the sky, taking the piece of paper with it. Arriving at a certain field, the bird flew down and landed on a person's hand. That person quickly took the paper from under the bird's feet. So it was Deacon White. Deacon White opened the piece of paper and said, found it, not far away in Morny City. Grey Deacon stood by, his voice filled with excitement as he replied. Finally found it, I can't wait any longer. Seeing that Grey Deacon seemed too excited, he immediately reminded him not to make too much trouble. Our main mission is to save Deacon Hong. Grey Deacon waved his hand and replied. I know, but teaching that queen a lesson is also our mission. Said. The two Deacon White and Grey Deacon turned around and said to their subordinates below. Brothers, are you ready? The action is about to begin. The subordinates below were filled with enthusiasm and shouted in unison. Yes. In Morning City, the night had already covered the entire city. A voice rang out. Lord Willer, we have already arrived at the next city. In the conference room, Timothy, Count Willer, Count Robin, and Axe were sitting and discussing. Count Robin extended his hand and asked, what should we do next? Timothy gave his opinion. My thinking was to retreat, hide first, Field wouldn't suffer such a loss anyway. Axe also gave his opinion. I thought we should continue to disperse, now Field must think we're returning to the territory, so we go the opposite way, continue deeper. Count Robin worriedly said, let's not talk about dispersing, Your Majesty must return to the territory, otherwise it's too dangerous. In the future, it's better to reduce these frontline activities. Timothy was upset when he heard that, saying, I have my own plans, don't worry. A very small sound was heard. Robin turned around and saw that Axe and Uxie were acting strangely. He asked, what's wrong? Mr. Axe, Mr. Uxie. Axe said, we thought we heard something just now, and Uxie quickly put her hand to her mouth, signaling for everyone to be quiet. The sound of weapons clashing became clearer, Axe's eyes widened, his face darkened, observing the situation. Timothy and Robin also detected the strange sound, they both had the same perception, something was wrong, there was an enemy attack. Timothy and Robin rushed out of the room. The soldier standing outside said in surprise, Your Majesty, there are enemies. Looking down from the high wall, the entire city was surrounded by smoke and fire, many buildings were on fire, explosions occurred continuously, people below were panicking and running in panic. Right outside the prison, Deacon Hong was being rescued by Black Iris men, while the guards were being beaten down. A knight saw him from afar and quickly shouted, the prison was being robbed, hurry up and chase. Timothy saw this scene and hurriedly shouted, these bastards, quick, come help. Axe beside him still kept his composure and quickly pulled Timothy and said, Your Majesty, don't act rashly. Then he continued, the current situation is too chaotic, you retreat first, let me organize this place. Timothy couldn't do anything at this point. After a moment of thought, Timothy sighed and replied, I know. Axe's face became serious, he picked up his sword, and said with murderous intent, Uxie, big brother, we must also help. Uxie behind him nodded and replied, okay. On the other side, a member of Black Iris raised his sword, preparing to slash down at the knight in front. The other knight was screaming in fear. But the Black Iris man was suddenly stabbed through the chest by a sword. His face turned pale, he coughed up blood and collapsed. It turned out that the owner of that sword was Axe. Axe then told the knight, don't panic, come with us. The other soldiers regained their composure, picked up their swords and nodded in response. Yes. Above, Timothy and Robin were standing on the wall observing. A soldier came up to report. Your Highness, Mr. Axe and Mr. Uxie have reorganized their troops and are counterattacking. Timothy nodded, indicating that he understood. Yes, yes. We must protect them well. On the other side, Axe was still fighting fiercely. Axe had just cut one person, and immediately commanded the squad. Everyone, charge with us. Chase them out. The soldiers behind nodded. Yes. Then continued to charge into the battle. Uxie looked at everyone. Immediately felt something was wrong. The Black Iris team is not numerous. Moreover, it is clear that the chaos has saved Deacon Hong. Why are they still here fighting us? A thought suddenly flashed through their mind. Unless. Uxie quickly shouted. Not good. Axe. On the other side, where Timothy and Robin were standing, a dark figure stood in the distance, watching them. It turned out to be Deacon White and Grey Deacon. They were standing on the roof watching Timothy. Deacon White had a cold face and Grey Deacon was smiling happily. Excitedly. The guard suddenly saw something. He turned around and looked behind him. Before the two knights could see clearly, Deacon White had already galloped like the wind. He arrived beside the two of them. A scythe in his left hand slashed one person. A chain in his right hand slashed the other person. Deacon White's face was cold as he snorted. Too slow. Before the two knights could do anything, they were dead. His mouth was still not finished speaking. Not good. At the side, Grey Deacon, wearing a mask, flew like a gust of wind towards Timothy and Robin. Grey Deacon even gave an arrogant greeting. Little Queen. This is His Highness greeting for you. Seeing you come. Timothy's eyes widened. Full of fear. Robin standing beside him shouted. Your Majesty. Timothy saw the image of a scythe on a chain flying towards him. A scream was heard. The scythe was blocked by Ukshi's weapon. Ukshi said while supporting them. As expected, your target is Her Majesty the Queen. On the other side, Grey Deacon saw the scene before him. His face was gloomy. He said strangely. TSK. Axe came with his sword and asked. Your Majesty, Ukshi. Is everyone okay? Deacon White turned around. Said to Grey Deacon. Grey Deacon. Grey Deacon quickly put away his weapon, said, I know. Deacon White glanced back and said, Queen Timothy. This is a lesson for you, Your Highness. We hope you will behave yourself. Put away your ridiculous intelligence. Don't hinder Your Highness's great cause anymore. Otherwise, the next time we meet, things won't be so simple. Timothy gritted his teeth angrily after hearing this. Axe stood beside him. Angry and shouted. Stop talking nonsense. Give up and accept it. Deacon White bowed his head and said goodbye. Saying goodbye, Grey Deacon took out a bomb. Smiling happily, he said goodbye to the little devils. A loud bang rang out, white smoke billowed, covering everyone. Everyone at the scene had their eyes irritated by the smoke, so they covered their noses, coughed, and cursed, hateful. After a while, the smoke cleared, and there was no one left where Deacon White and Grey Deacon were. Seeing this, Axe angrily said, These bastards. In a certain forest, Axe and Ukshi were sitting on horses, leading the army. Axe sat on the horse, his whole body drooping, his head bowed to the ground, his face sad and lifeless. Axe thought back to yesterday's battle. While he was fighting the enemy, Ukshi told him, Axe, we fell for their trick, their target is Her Majesty the Queen. At that moment, he can only shout in surprise, What? Thinking of this, his spirit sank again. Ukshi walked beside him and saw Axe looking so gloomy, so she asked, What's wrong, Axe? You're so moody. Axe saw Ukshi mention him and turned to answer suspiciously, Big brother Ukshi. Then Axe explained, he was just thinking, last night he was so busy fighting the enemy that he forgot what his most important mission was. Luckily, Big brother Ukshi was there, otherwise, he wouldn't know how to explain to His Majesty now. Then Axe smiled bitterly, sure enough, it would be a long time before he could take charge of a side alone. Ukshi patted Axe's back to comfort him, encouraging him, Little fool, everyone has a time when they are young and experience passion rushing to their heads. Everyone has it, this is nothing. Once immersed in past mistakes, denying himself, he will never be able to become a lone knight to take charge of a side. Axe's face showed surprise, then he said emotionally, Big brother Ukshi. As if remembering something, Axe asked, So, every time before taking action, Big brother Ukshi remembers you? The wind blew, making the green branches sway in the wind. A knight appeared, bowed and said, Two gentlemen, His Majesty invites you. The two men heard this and turned around. Ukshi said, Oh, I see. Ukshi then told Axe, telling him a secret to keep his mind steady. Every time before taking action, thinking back to the person he originally wanted to risk his life to protect with all his might, he would be able to act calmly. Speaking of this, Ukshi laughed loudly, glanced at Axe, That's right, do you have such a person in your heart? Before, I heard you mumbling something about coming back to propose or something. While speaking, Ukshi excitedly patted Axe's shoulder. Axe was startled, his face flushed, and said in panic, Big brother Ukshi, you heard it, since when? Ukshi did not answer Axe's question but laughed even louder, unable to help but exclaim, Come on boy, I remember you were a human girl, youth is so good. Axe on the other side pulled the horse away from Ukshi a bit, covered his face that was already red with embarrassment, and begged Ukshi, Don't say anymore, Big brother Ukshi. Ukshi stopped teasing him and pulled the reins, letting the horse gallop forward, saying, Let's go, meet His Majesty Timothy. Axe nodded and replied, Okay. Thinking about the scene just now, strange, why did Big brother Ukshi feel a bit sad just now? Your group has arrived at Timothy's camp. Inside the camp, Timothy is discussing with Count Willer and Robin. Robin stands up, looking at Timothy with a tense expression, Your Majesty, do you really want to ask for help from the Han Dynasty? Timothy crossed his arms and frowned, There was no other way, he replied, although I don't want to, but if we continue like this, it will make field grow stronger. By then, we will completely lose Yadian. In any case, Lord Willer's attack was predicted by the enemy, and we suffered a lot of losses. Count Willer lowered his head, his eyes filled with sadness as he replied, I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Robin hurriedly stood up, pointed at himself, and said, I underestimated their intelligence capabilities, it was my fault.